Bada bing, bada boom. Alright, we should be live. And we got the chat working. Awesome. Perfect. Which means the only thing I have to do is actually I see. All right, type again. We'll do that. Maybe later we'll try to make it bigger. Actually, I could test that now before we get everyone in here. Alright, yeah, let's do that now. Welcome in, random guy. We are just trying to fix our chat here for a second. Alright, I think I got it so that the chat could be bigger, which is ideal. But if not, it's not the end of the world. We'll fix it for the next stream. If one of you don't mind typing. That's good enough. We'll stream for the day and then we'll see how it looks overall. Alright, let's get into it. Let's see here. So, from yesterday, we have some people that were talking about building a Barbarian and Ranger subclass. I will give those people about like an hour to see if they join in. I don't want to do that without them. But one thing we are in queue for today is map and lore building that we will do simultaneously on the website where I make maps, and that is Incarnate. So, we're going to start with a fresh new world and pretty much design everything together. And then the cool part is you guys as the chat will be able to build lore, NPCs, locations. We'll get ideas together and it'll definitely be a community thing. Alright, so the first thing we got to do is decide the terrain of the world. And that starts first with changing the color of the water. Alright. We're not going to do anything crazy. We're just going to make a typical fantasy world. So we don't need the water to be any kind of dark or too bright or anything. Let's grab a nice watercolor. Kind of want to, this might be too bright though. Let's maybe jump with this water texture and then we will change up the color potentially. See if we can give it a different blue, give it some more saturation, brightness. Nah, looks foggy. Alright. I'm thinking this one then. Give it some extra saturation, a little bit of brightness, a little bit of contrast, and we will see how this looks. So now we'll just brush it all over. Question is, does this look like some good water? The only other option we could do, I've done this one before. It could have been a different one. I know it's like a Fey water. It was this one. This one, we give it that color, a little bit of saturation. Actually, brighten it just a little bit. Going on the contrast. So, this is water option 1 for the background. And then this is option 2. It'll come into play, so this is not going to be our decided landmarks, but we're just going to draw some landmarks to essentially give it some comparison. Let's draw a little more here, some more there. Alright, kind of looks like a flamingo, but whatever. So now we can go back to our brushes, go to the history of it. And so we got option 1 right here. Or this is option 2, rather. And then option 1 was the earlier one. Which is a little bit of a darker color for the water, but a little more realistic. I think we can go for something wavy if we wanted. Excuse me, had to burp. But we could also add some water alphas here. So this is actually kind of cool because it just completely takes over. I don't like how big that is though. So we're going to go to lowering size. That is another option that we could do. Welcome back, Nothing. Glad to see you returned. Alright, so we could add potential waves. Oh, I guess if you try to brush the waves over. Yeah, I think this one is just a little prettier on the eyes. Question is, these waves might be too big, but are the waves a nice touch, or do you guys feel like it clutters the map too much? Because we could keep it as a very obvious sort of demonstration that it is water, but typically what I do is my maps are much bigger, and I'll put waves to represent ocean water versus river water or lake water for people. But that is up to whatever we find good. For now, we can kind of keep it like this. This is a little more of a realistic map style. And then the next thing we need to do is actually decide on our land masses. As much as we like Flamingo Island, I don't know if that is what we will go with. So we're going to subtract everything and start to add maps. All right. So if you guys are ever making a map on here, the important thing is to decide how big your campaign is. So a couple options you have is if you're trying to make your entire world, fill this map here. So the other option is if you are making a map for one continent that they are taking place in. So I've made some previous maps. The first map I've made, the entire world is just one continent pretty much. And so what this allowed me to do is to put everything in really, really nice detail as we go around. And that part was pretty nice. The other times I have tried creating an entire world pretty much all in one map. This one is a small scaled world, so it's not really too crazy big still, but you can see that there's not as much detail to all the places as there is sort of when you get around here. Now the third map is by far the largest one I've made, and this has a lot of detail after they added something new in Incarnate, which is like 8K resolution. Sorry, so you were able to essentially put a lot more detail in things. And as you can see in this one, I have waves of water on the ocean, as I've said, but on rivers and lakes, I don't put those to kind of let the players know as they look around. So we have two options here right off the bat. Do you guys feel like you want to make an entire world together? Or do you feel like you want to make just one super detailed continent that is going to be one continent part of the larger world later on? Now that I'm thinking about it, I think we just make a continent. So this is called Incarnate. It is a website that you can use to make maps. They do charge $5 a month to use all of their assets. There is a free version, which you can use like, I want to say maybe about 10 to 20% of their assets. As you can see, the main assets you're going to be looking at is like the objects. So when I load them all up, these are all things that I can place on the map. So you can make battle maps here, and you can also design your overall world itself. The best way I can actually showcase this tool is to very quickly go to the Explore page. So as you can see, I can go to the Explore and see what other people have made. Give me 1 second. All right, Fern and Kaiju are back. Welcome back, everyone. Glad to see some returning faces. So yeah, you could see some people have made maps of their world, their cities. Others have made battle maps that they would use for combat in a specific situation. So it could be used for both. It's just really the amount of work that you want to put on it. But if we want to make a world together, I think the best thing we do is that we make a single continent, kind of like this, essentially. And then later on, if we have other people coming in and joining, we can expand other continents that are all part of the same world that the chat is constantly making together with me. That could be pretty cool. So in that case, continent does not mean it has to be one piece of landmass. It's just we're essentially, if this is, so like, we have our topics today. The idea with this map that we're making right now is this is the world we're making, and we are essentially making a map for this area. And then later on, when we get more people, we can make a map for this area, and then you get the idea. Together, we're making all these locations for one giant map. Nope. I clicked off of that. So that being said, I do like to put different land masses because in general, it allows you to have, at the very least, differences in, I don't want to say theology, but kingdoms and atmosphere with the writing. So you can be a little more creative and free rather than having to follow all these sort of same philosophies. So I'm thinking, what if we have sort of something in the north, kind of cuts around here. We have a landmass in the south. And then we have a landmass in the middle that is almost kind of a neutral state. Or just a neutral sort of nation in a sense. Do you guys like that's sort of top bottom map terrains, or do you feel like you guys want to go side and side? Essentially horizontal or vertical. So what do you guys feel like you would like? Vertical might be the better move. So if we get rid of what we just drew here, instead, yeah, I think I agree. Vertical, you can add some a little bit of more details around things. So we kind of can just draw some mumbo jumbo, and then we can add our little mess in the center. Alright. And then what we do is we start adding the finer details. So once you get a sort of large drawing of your continent, what you then do is I hold S and I make it very small. And then we can zoom in and start to essentially surgically implement the terrain as we wanted to. So if I wanted to create kind of a little coast here that might be like a port town or something, then I can kind of add that in better detail. What we also want to do next, before we go any further, is decide on kind of the color of the terrain. So one thing that this app does really nice is it differentiates between background and foreground. So I can put background as the ocean and the water. And when I put foreground, this is only going to affect the land masses that I put in. So if I want to get out of the water catalog and go to grass, right, this is kind of the nice standard, but we want to go ahead and change the color up a bit. So add a little bit extra hue, make it a little more lively and fantasy-esque. Give it some nice color. Lower the brightness just a little bit. And then play around with the contrast. So now I can come here. I can start placing the map. I want to also decrease the size. There we go. And so what this happens is if I brush over the water, it will not affect the water. It's just going to affect the land masses that I've placed in. And that is essentially a very, very, very useful tool. And vice versa. If I go back to the background and I want to change the water, right, I will then do this, and it only affects that side. This is a good time to ask that question too right now, though, kind of with our land masses, on which water type we like more. Do you guys like the first color of the water or this one more? What do you think of smaller islands as an idea? That is always, always good, especially when you want to add sort of sections in your game that are independent of the grand story. Because the idea is you have two land masses here, right? And I won't, let's say I want to put some kingdoms or castles. I think I have to put castle. Okay, let's say I'm placing my kingdoms here somewhere, right? The idea is now you have to essentially start filling out your lore, and everything has to adhere to what your kingdoms are and everything. But when you put little small islands around, then you can essentially start to have these states that are independent of the grand lore that's going on in these large continents. So because they're isolated, you can put whatever creative writing that you want. So you have the right idea, Keith. Smaller islands in your world is really nice. Typically my process is that as I create the world, I'll start to get ideas that, like, oh man, I really want to do this thing, but I already decided that my world is going to be about this and this and this. And that's where you start to make your small islands, is to essentially give yourself that leeway of being able to, in a sense, create almost little spin-offs for your areas. So yeah, it's a very good idea. I like this one. So in that case, we could stay with this water. It's a little more of a bright fantasy-esque, which I like. Keep in mind that a lot of times you want to make your map reflective of essentially what your world is going to be about. So if I'm making a very dark campaign and that's the theme I'm going for, then I would absolutely, obviously, change the color of my water. I'd come here, I'd go to the saturation, the hue, and cut to saturation. Actually, this is the wrong one to use. I'm pretty sure they have a really nice dark water that I used before. Is that one? Ah, yes, these two. These ones are really, really nice. So yeah, you can see the difference right here. If I present this map for you, it feels like you're going on an adventure. It's a beautiful world and everything. But if I decide to change it to this, all of a sudden the undertone of what's going on seems a little more grim. And vice versa, I would also change the grass in that situation. So the hue of the grass would, the saturation would go down to make it a little more dried up. Oh, whoops. Foreground. And you can see, just off of color alone, it just kind of gives two different styles of what they're going to come into. So, cool little tip there. Color always is sort of a skipped thing. Don't be afraid to take time to put in a good color, but also don't overthink it. Okay, so we've created our grass. We've created our land masses. Potential new islands will come out route. What we need to do next, and what I like to do, is to differentiate essentially temperature. So the first thing I like to do is obviously kind of put snow in the northern parts of the area. And this app is really, really nice because they have recently done a lot of good work adding snow. And so we can play test with a lot of things. Size needs to Go down around here. We'll test it. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. Let's see. We could go for this one and make it a little more bright on the snow. Does that look nice? It looks a little pink. Looks like a cloud. All right, bring the saturation back. There we go. Right, and then we can come to the size. Lower it to show bigger area. The water waves looks like they're very treacherous with a darker pattern. Exactly, and that's a really cool thing to portray, is if you want to make water travel very difficult, and that could be an entirely lore reason, is, hey, you know, the seas are very scary, very dangerous to come across, and now you have to figure out why. Is it because there's some kind of monster, there's a magic, there's just a difficulty in the world itself, like a geological structure. There's a lot of things you can do. That's where it gets really, really fun, and your mind explodes with ideas. Something that's very important in map making that I've learned later on is essentially the blend. So, but how can we be sure that true north isn't the west side of the leftmost main island? That's a good point. I mean, and that's the cool part, is we've decided we're making a section of a larger world. So you can completely, if you want, spin this around and say, hey, you know what? North is actually technically this way. But it's all up to what you guys want. That being said, blend is important here, because your map looks really weird if all of a sudden it's snow and they come down to immediately grass. They can see this. So what you do is you come over here and you put the opacity. First, take it down to 0.8. Then come, lower it a bit. Then you start to sprinkle it in. Then go to 0.5. Start to sprinkle that in. Then you go down to 0.3. Sprinkle that in. What you could also do is, if you realize, like, hey, I want a little more snow, then same thing, I go to 0.5 pretty much, and I kind of start drawing over. And now it looks like there's essentially a blend going on. It's not layer to layer. I can go to 0.3 and kind of go down. It works. Snow is a little weird. It works way better with other sort of assets that you could use. But the idea is you want to essentially, whenever you have two different terrains coming across, you want to play with opacity to blend them. The other thing is, if you're lucky, you'll have assets where there's already a mix. So for here, they already have snow and grass. So I can raise the opacity a bit. I can kind of start to play around with this. The only issue is you now have to make it match the color. So, boom. And that can kind of give a nice sort of segue as to sort of the map creation. The other thing is, also, don't draw it in a line. Draw it in kind of sort of sprinkled lines vertically, if that makes sense. So I'll come here and, you know, put a patch here, put a patch here, and then as you can see now, things are starting to look a bit more different. And that's how you can kind of create a nice blend. And then you can kind of see the difference here, where you kind of have snow, immediately grass, snow, and then kind of snowy grass, snow, grass. It sort of adds some stuff. And it becomes, when you have just the map, it's very noticeable. But if we want to go in and add some trees real quick, you can start to see it blends really well. Did you ever experiment with trees for cordoning off cold regions? Yes, absolutely. That's another very, very good style. You can see, I believe I did it on this map. As you can see, I have that grass. Grass goes up to grassy snow, and then I have snow mountains that then just goes to snow. And that is actually a really nice blend as well. I actually always usually prefer these. The other thing that helps it a lot is when you start to make we can close that out. I needed help with my chat, so that was a little YouTube video I was watching. Is to put trees. Trees are very, very nice. And then we can increase the amount of trees we want, and if that is too dense, then we can kind of start to do this. And now we kind of have this forest that separates the biomes. But as you can see under down here, got that going on, and this sort of works together. Now the nice part is later on you can kind of come into sections and delete them, and that's where you will typically put villages and stuff, and then you can kind of sprinkle stuff around to kind of show settlements and woods. But for now we'll just have a forest there. Well, actually what I want to do is I want to put a forest in a mountain. So, mountains, you have a lot of different ones. Obviously we have some sort of snow assets already that we can place. I'm not really a fan of these ones because they just feel, they don't contrast and sort of camouflage with the environment too well. There is another asset that I really, really liked, and it's these ones, because it's takes the coloration of whatever you place it on. So as you guys can see, I can place the mountain here and it's green. I can place it here and it's white, and I can use that to essentially have it perfectly camouflage with whatever environment it's under. You could also do these ones, the dark mountains. You could also do the snow mountains here. So the snow mountains work pretty well because if I go to the dark mountains, I will place it, but it doesn't contrast as well as the preloaded snow one. I could come in and go to the advanced settings and play around with it, but this one works pretty well. Random question, but do you charge players to play as your game? Sounds like they're pretty high quality. I appreciate you valuing it to that extent. I've never done sort of a campaign online with random people. I've only ever run home games, sort of in real life with people. I've tried online like once or twice when I first started, and I had a lot of instances of essentially players like, I don't want to say they were cheating, but they were making some questionable rolls, and we didn't have a website at the time that checks your rolls, so I just didn't kind of like that. But yeah, so as far as my DM experience, I've only ever ran with very, very nice friends in person, and I don't charge for those. Sorry, I was drinking, but as time goes on and the channel evolves, we can see where things go. I forgot who brought it up earlier. One of you brought up the idea of a getting players together for a one-shot, and that sounds like it'd actually be a lot of fun. In sort of an ideal sense, if this stream and channel gets enough traction, I could definitely do, like, if not a monthly one-shot, or sorry, if not a bi-weekly one-shot, then a monthly one-shot. And I don't really feel comfortable charging people to just play D&D. So, I think at its core, D&D is always meant to be very, very accessible. I understand there's a lot of people that put a lot of work and time, so for them it's, yeah, I want to do it as a job. And if it gets to that point, then perhaps we'll cross that bridge, but we'll see how that goes. Maybe a dark mountain contrasts better as a waterfront adjacent more so than inland. Oh, so you mean kind of like for coastal mountains, the dark mountains work better? Let's see. I don't think it'll... So I think the reason why the coding doesn't contrast is it's a foreground and background issue. Because if I went to foreground and use the water... Yep, see, that's how that part will work. So what could kind of be cool, actually, is you just gave me a new idea, is we could make a mountain, go to the foreground and make it very small, and we can draw it as if it's sort of a river going through. And then you can detail which mountain's gonna have rivers going on them. What are your favorite types of campaigns? That's the beauty of D&D, is there's so many different variations of a campaign that someone can run. Ultimately, I think for everyone, the first time you play D&D is usually the most magical because no one has any idea what's going on. So you guys are just having fun with everything that you can. I do love very story-driven fantasy sort of kingdoms and magic put together in a best sense. So essentially any campaign setting where the players aren't sort of... what's the best way I could say this? I'm not too big on campaigns where I'm sort of meant to be a chosen one or anything. I love the classic trope of being an adventurer or like a mercenary that's going from town to town, city to city. They're trying to make a name for themselves, and you know, maybe they uncover themselves in something larger than they thought, and that's how that campaign spirals out like crazy. So I always kind of love those sort of settings because I feel like it gives the DM a lot of leeway to play with very serious characters and very serious stuff, but it also doesn't undermine very important quests. So I can explain this in better detail. We're gonna sidetrack a bit, but essentially, if you have your party over here and they are between level 1 through 5, and you immediately send them on the big quest. So I'm not saying anything is going to be wrong with this, by the way. I'm just saying the side effect of what happens. If you send them on a big quest to go save the world from levels 1 through 5, they're going to go from 5 to 20, ignoring every less important quest because they are on this big quest. So if you try to send them on a quest to essentially save a cat on a tree, then they're going to elect to ignore it because they have more important things to do. They're on a quest to save a world. Someone else can go save the cat in the tree. So it's kind of, hey, we have to forget that and go on this one. So they start to hyper fixate on what's going on there. That's not a bad thing. In some campaigns, the DM is new, or it's a very short campaign, so it's not necessarily railroaded. It's just the journey's a little more boxed in. I like it to be sort of open-ended and adventurous, and that's always how I build my worlds out. Is I essentially build my world, and what I do is I have 3 to 5 essentially main problems going on in the world. I should just text this. So I have 3 to 5 main problems. And this is essentially 3 to 5 BBGs that I would make. And these are potential BBGs. And so then I leave the world open to my players, and they naturally choose which problem they want to make their campaign and their journey about. The only issue with that one, though, is if you have an inexperienced player, they get lost in the chaos because they have no idea what to do because you're essentially not holding their hand. So that's the only downside on that one as well. I typically do it for more experienced players, and then if I know I have some new players, I'll typically box them in just to get them used to D&D and sort of how to progress a quest in general. One of my favorite D&D one-shots was a Digimon style Retheming of Tyranny of Dragons. That sounds really awesome. My friend had a sort of a Disney-themed campaign that was very, very cool, very lighthearted. But for obvious copyright, we don't talk about that too much. But there's a lot of cool ones. A lot of people will run D&D settings for things they're passionate about, and that's not entirely a bad idea. So we're gonna put the map making on pause for now to talk about this. So for example, I have a friend who wants to make a D&D world about Runeterra, and for those of you that don't know what that is, that's just the map for League of Legends. So if you know what the game League of Legends is, they have the show Arcane on Netflix. If you haven't played the game, maybe watch that. But they have Runeterra, which is like their whole world that they've been creating in the game for, 10 plus years or however long League's been out. Another popular world is Azeroth from World of Warcraft. So this is another popular world. And what was the last one was Star Wars. So I'm gonna use these three as the main prime examples. So Runeterra, Azeroth, and Star Wars. Star Wars doesn't really have a name for the world. There's a bunch of them. But if you are very passionate about these and you want to run a D&D world in these settings, it could be super cool, especially for the players, because how many of us grew up watching Star Wars and it's like, damn, dude, like it'd be so cool if I lived in Star Wars. And that's what you get to do with D&D in Star Wars, is you make characters in the Star Wars universe and you're all living that life. It feels awesome. I DM'd a couple Star Wars sessions but never really went anywhere. Sadly, that campaign died out for scheduling. But the only issue, and the thing that can completely destroy the campaign in its tracks, is player perception about the world. So if someone's very, very passionate about Star Wars, right? The DM is essentially kind of in this weird situation where they have two options. One, they make their homebrew lore, where they can change some things around to keep the story interesting, not predictable, and can kind of go about the other way. The other one is follow to the T, pretty much. I don't know if it's... I know the expression follow to the T. I don't know if it's ever T or just T. We're just gonna say follow the source completely. Haha. So, what this essentially becomes is it's the problem where if I as the DM want to, let's say, make it that, hey, I didn't like that Darth Maul died in the first movie of Star Wars. Spoiler alert, by the way, but you're like 40 years behind, so, if you got spoiled, too bad. I didn't like it that Darth Maul supposedly died in the first one. I'm going to change that sequence of events so that Darth Maul is a consistent character in this world that I want playing. Well, you might have some players with their player perception who could get mad at that and be like, well, DM, Darth Maul died in the first movie and you can't have Darth Maul continue on. And so now there's kind of this problem going on where one of the parties, whether it's the player or the DM, has to compromise and may not be happy with that choice. And that could be a big issue. The best way to solve it is that the DM needs to tell the players and let them know beforehand, hey, I'm going to change some things about the lore. This is up to my creative interpretation, so things may not always be on a one-to-one scale or one-to-one reiteration of what you know. I want to change things because I want to keep it unpredictable. I want to put some plot twists. I want to put whatever. I need you to play along with me, essentially. However, if you do that and you creatively put your take on it and make it worse, then the players are not going to enjoy that campaign, and you've tarnished that idea for them. I'm back. What did I miss? We're just talking about if you are running a D&D campaign with a pre-made world, essentially, that people have played. So Runeterra is from League over here. Azeroth is from WoW, and then Star Wars, obviously, from Star Wars. There's like taking a world you like and having your player characters in it, and then accurately portraying the world. I run a One Piece campaign that doesn't have any characters from the show, and that's perfectly fine. That's a good way to do it too. Is sometimes like people want to play the universe is what's compelling and interesting, but they don't want to roleplay characters that are already depicted in TV shows and depicted in sort of movies, because that's already been played by the person. So the players are going to be like, hey, are you going to be able to play it to that same level? I absolutely love One Piece, and if someone had to essentially roleplay Luffy or roleplay Zoro, that's where this player conception comes in. I've watched 1,000 episodes of Luffy and Zoro be played. It's an impossible challenge. It's unfair to expect the DM to pull that off perfectly. We're not all like amazing actors that have taken their whole life to dedicate the craft like they have. Unless you can pull it off, in case, props to you. I am jealous. But yes, you are correct, Wifty. Also, welcome. Kaiju, a campaign I played in where each player has a wisp inside of them, which reanimated them to life, and has a very philosophical and deep game involving a lot of dark elements and self-discovery. That is awesome. I love sort of coming to age or coming to deal and to accept sort of past traumas or past lessons that you're supposed to learn as a characters. Those are always amazing and compelling arcs. Darth Maul did survive into the 2008 Clone Wars series. Yes, you are correct. There's some people that haven't like watched the show, so they don't know that too much. So kind of in the movie, they're like, hey, but however, you can create a unique and awesome experience if the DM has established that trust. So like when my friend ran the Disney campaign, right? He was playing characters in this private sort of D&D in our garage and stuff like that. So we weren't selling anything, so let's not get copyrighted. But if he played like Gaston and he played like Beast from Beauty and the Beast, or he played like Mickey Mouse or something, we all know what those people were like in the movie. But he made enough of a genuine attempt and enough of a trust with the players that we loved the way he played some characters. And then there were some characters he played that some other players sort of had problems with. Like, hey, I don't think that person would really play like that. And that kind of created sort of a break in his confidence as well, because now he was less inclined to essentially play characters for the fear of people who are very passionate about it getting very disappointed in it. And that can create a pressure on you. And that is one of the drawbacks of DMing one of these, is you have, once again, that player perception. I think that the only person who can really truly play a character is the person who made them. Absolutely. And that's always the tough thing in D&D, is sometimes people try to tell other people, hey, wouldn't your character do this? Wouldn't your character do that? There's no one who has that authority other than the person who made that character themselves. Given sometimes, like, it becomes an issue in metagaming of, hey, you know, your character doesn't know that, hey, well, my character would do this, and then it's like, can you really tell them, no, your character wouldn't do that when they're the ones who made it? But yeah, so playing a character that someone else designed is never going to be as good as they did it, obviously, because they created it. It is about genuine attempt and respect to the original creator that makes it okay with everybody else. So as long as you're not doing anything to disrespect what their original portrayal of the character was, then that's when you can have people's back on it. And that's kind of what we see in like The Witcher, that the show that Netflix made. There's a lot of scenes where people are kind of frustrated with how Geralt is portrayed, even Henry Cavill himself, who left after like season 3. And that's because, you know, those directors and the writers no longer were respecting how Geralt was originally portrayed by the person who made him. But when people made the Witcher games, and also the first season of Witcher, kind of when Henry Cavill was doing, everyone loved it. He was doing such a good job. So, you know, they had their, he had their love with it. But let's go back to the map building. Now, so we found a cool way to add some water. Alright, so the thing is, this is something to consider when you guys make a world. In the northern part of your map, it's fair to say that's usually where you would encounter colder weather, because that's what makes sense in real life. The thing is, the D&D always has a loophole you can use with magic. I could literally say there's snow down here and it's because of magical reasons. Or there's snow right here and nowhere else. Thing is, you don't want to always do it, because then the players will feel like you're kind of using it as a cop-out. Sorry, a cop-out. So, this is why you would want to geographically not follow what you do in the real world. Because if I put 2 snow areas in this world, that means I have to essentially DM 2 different snow places and think of ways to make them unique, when snow itself is a very vague and tedious thing to describe after the first time. So, it's the same thing with deserts. I advise that you only make 1 desert region and 1 snow region. Never duplicate them, because how many times can I explain sand dunes, avalanches, and snow pine trees before you guys are kind of like, yeah, I get the point. It was cool when we were reanimated. We didn't have any memories of their past actions in life. Part of the game when the characters went to his purgatory-like place where they had to. That's really cool. You can where they had to talk and understand the individuals they have wronged in their past and find a way to not only apologize to their victims but forgive themselves. Deep stuff, man. That is so beautiful. Kind of having these characters that are slowly discovering what it is they did in their past life and are essentially seeking atonement. That is... Oh, I would watch that. Unless you're in Australia, then the cold is in the south. Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I can't remember where I found it, but there's a neat little guidebook I found on how to make biomes interesting. Yeah, that sounds like it could be awesome. And always remember, guys, never ever feel discouraged to look at information and writing that other people have done. Even if it's not yourself. Humble yourself as sort of a DM and a writer, because you are not going to be the one who figures out every little unique thing. You can't possibly think of everything. So the best way that you can become the best DM that you can potentially be is to get inspired by everyone else. Look at what they're saying and the tips that they're giving, because they found something that could work. And if you like it, then it's like, awesome. If they say something that sounds completely like lunacy, then don't follow that. Okay. Real quick, which mountains do you guys like more? The left one here or the right one? I'll zoom in so we have some closer comparison. Let me read. Yeah. The thing about is biomes are... So like when I made this world, by the way, the idea is I have this inner circle and then I have different biomes stretched out on the edges of the circle. I get that circle don't have edges, you know what I mean. The thing is so for this one I had sort of the lightning biome, the death biome, the cold biome, air biome, space, life, all this other stuff. The best thing that I found was that, and this is the reason I'm saying to make one biome of each type, is you really, really make it unique, and you can make it sort of have a fun interaction for the players to remember. Normal grassland is obviously what you duplicate around the world, and that's because normal grassland is never what you're really focusing on too much. You're focusing on what's on it. Is it kingdoms? Are they caves? Are they mountains? Are they dungeons? And that's sort of why the grasslands are always an exception. That being said, there's ways to make them unique. When you really get into advanced stuff, you know, placing a mountain with a river in it, that's when you want the grass to essentially be very rich and very sort of nourishing for plant life nearby. And then as you get sort of closer to deserts or closer to sort of, I guess, death zones, as you would call them, that's when you can have sort of plants wither, and perhaps that place faces famine and have starvation issues. What was your favorite NPC characters you have made? So my favorite character, or rather, my favorite NPC that I've made is something that I've used as a tool to solve for most things in my world, and that is, look, I don't know if I can, could I post a picture right here? I think I can. Give me a second. Stay patient with me, guys. Okay. I do not own this picture, by the way, for clarification. I have not made this picture. I do not know who the original artist is, but I use Death as someone who is in every single one of my campaigns because I use him as a tool to make the world make sense. So, in a way, when I have my players, and let's say this player right here is going to miss the session. A lot of times it's really annoying and frustrating to have to, every time a player misses a session, and it will happen a lot, to have to find some lore reason of why they split away from the party to go do whatever they had to do. Sometimes it's easy if they're like a paladin or cleric. Hey, they got called by their order. But if they're like a rogue or a wizard or a barbarian, you have to start thinking creative, you know? Hey, the barbarian got lost for a session, and you start to have to kind of play in suspension of disbelief. I use Death. You can use whatever you want. It could be a wizard, it could be a deity, anything you want. But Death comes in for the session that they're missing, and he says, hey, for timeline reasons that you can't understand, or for deity reasons you can't understand, I need to take this person out, and they're coming with me for the session. And so, that is, he's been my favorite person because I essentially use him as sort of my thinking as a DM a lot of times. So he's very very blunt and upfront with them. So he speaks the way that we normally speak. So he'll just kind of show up and be like, hey, what's up, guys? Gotta take this guy. You know why? Too bad if you don't. And then pulls him out, and I got him for the session. That is probably my favorite NPC that I've made. The interactions have been really nice. The players have kind of always laughed at it, so it's always been good. And let's revert him out. I like making a world with custom biomes and stuff like that. Yeah, it's always fun. It adds some diversity to it. I think the present of the right mountain works better as a coastal feature, but both are really good. I think I do agree with you as well. I had a really cool incarnate map I never use. I might have to make a world around it. Hey, you already got it down. Welcome, Nathan. Welcome to the stream. Nice to see you. The realm in the game was named Vespera Exordium. Forgive me if I butchered that, but Sanctum of Redemption, which I think was a nice and fitting name. I really like that name. Any names where you kind of add some nice Latin to it just always slap. I have a character like that. He is a dimensional hopper, and he even shows up in other campaigns sometimes as a guest. Yeah, and that's always the fun part is I never make the interaction longer than like a minute because you don't want the players to get very frustrated. Oh, we have an ad playing on the Lofi, so I'm going to mute that. You don't want the players to get exhausted and feel like they're constantly having to interact with them because you got to remember that first and foremost, they are there to serve as like a tool, not to be a character that's impactful to the story. So it's for that reason that I never have him actually impact the story in any way. He's there to be the person that can pull someone out when I need them to, and have some nice humor with them as well. I'm going to play my second session of D&D in a few weeks. Awesome. And they want me to have a pretty elaborate backstory, which makes no sense to me because we start off at level 1. Is this a red flag? So that's always kind of the tough part about D&D. A lot of people try to make very, very over the top backstories when they're starting at level 1. There's ways you can make elaborate backstories at level 1 that don't inherently mean that you are powerful. So what you do is the focus is going to be around not your character's power and strength, but the things that have happened around him. And that's how you kind of can create an elaborate backstory. The thing is, though, in D&D is everything is essentially roleplayed differently based on the skill of the player, because there are some people that like to make, so let's say I make this character and he has all these points in his backstory, and I also make a character that only has one simple point coming out of them. What this allows me to do for this character is that as I go through the story, they can be very, very, very adaptable, because I don't have all this essentially baggage or background lore that I have to adhere to. So I can quickly spin and mold this person in a different way. But over here, you do have some obligation, right? Because you have all these things that have affected you, that have changed your character. However, this also can give you a lot of spotlight in the campaign because you are dealing with so many things that are instrumental to the world itself. So odds are this person will have the most planned out screen time, but this person could potentially have the best screen time. And that's not to say that you can't be the best with either one. It's just the idea is, if they're asking you to have a pretty elaborate backstory at level 1, you want to make sure that the backstory has to deal with more of the things that happened to your character and not what your character did. And that's how you can have it make the most sense. So, for example, hey, the classic that most people use is my character lived in a village and it got burned down by raiders or bandits or another kingdom, and so I had to flee, and I fell into further things from my backstory. Some people have, hey, I went to a magic academy in a tower and it was super cool, but I either got kicked out or I graduated or whatever it is, and now my character is sort of a wizard on their journey to go out for their life. There is a lot of different things you could do in D&D. There's literally an unlimited amount of things you could do. I had a character who, my origin was I just worked at a hat shop and I made hats, and that's, his last name was Hatter. And he was just the guy who really was obsessed with clothing and fashion and loved hats. But the dynamic of what he became at the end of the campaign was so different. And that's because I just had one simple trait about me, and I was able to adapt to the story. Now, the way I made him interesting, though, is what there was complexity in the hat shop, right? He was an orphan. The guy who owned the hat shop took him in, taught him how to make hats. Eventually, that person passed away, and my character had a choice. Do I keep making hats for the rest of my life with him, or do I go out into the world? And that's kind of played into his values and his roleplay. So, again, things that happened to them, not things that they did to other people. If you need more clarification, ask me, and we can go over it a little more. But when a player misses a session in my party, we typically will make them just an NPC who repeats actions or buffs and heals if supports during 10 sessions will be in the tavern. Yeah, and that's like, that's the usual that you do at the start. The only issue is it starts to break the consistency of the character, because now you have to play into suspension of disbelief of having that the character would not join you on this journey or would go around chasing butterflies for the session. It, for me at least, made it more sense for characters if just straight up the Angel of Death showed up and said, hey, I gotta take this guy for, you know, X amount of time in the world, and yeah, there is nothing you can do about it, because at a game the characters know, hey, I understand the player is going to be gone from the session. But in character, there is no sort of, I don't have to worry about making a decision for that player's character that would tarnish their reputation or the characterization that they're trying to do. And that gives me a lot of relief as a DM too. I don't have to worry about making a decision for them. The character is important in a way as he hops to other DM's campaigns with permission to explain why some characters are there. I do plan to have a campaign orbit around him in the future though. Yeah, and that could be kind of cool, especially if the players really, really, really sort of fall in love with the NPC, is a campaign to eventually find out the origin behind it. I've been writing a character backstory with the idea of, in his 19 years of life, there's 4 or 5 core memories throughout who made him who he is. Yeah, and that's very relatable to real life too, because we are people that, you know, for our first 18 years of life, or depending on what country you have your education system is, we are essentially tracked to go through something. And then you can have from 18 to 20 or 18 to 25 or 18 to 30. Those can be very significant years that develop who you are as a person. He does more trading from dimension to dimension, and he does take some characters on side missions sometimes. It opened up for some pretty fun stuff. Thank you for helping me out on that. I'm a little nervous because there's a few people in my current party that was from my last session, which was a nightmare because they were edgelords. Wish me luck. Yeah, you'll get a lot of edgelords. The thing is, in D&D, a lot of people want to do something that they can't in real life. That is fundamentally the idea of D&D in the first place, because we can't obviously go to a fantasy world and be these adventurers in real life, but you can in D&D. The thing is, though, everyone comes to D&D for different reasons. Some people really like to make relationships with NPCs. Some people really like the combat. Some people like the glory. Some people like the gold and buying stuff. You have to give respect to why everyone sort of plays the game. All right, good night from Alaska. I'm headed to sleep. Have a great night. Hopefully a moose doesn't come and attack your house. Thank you for coming by, Wifty. If you haven't already, subscribed, and I hope to see you in future streams as well. However, there is still a level of cringe that some people can kind of do in certain regards to D&D. And I never find the way you play your character to be cringe. I only find it cringe when you disrupt the actual game itself with whatever your character is. So if you're gonna start PvPing the party and say, well, that's just me and doing what my character doing, and there's sort of like out of game anger that's coming in, that's kind of where I find it cringe. But kind of edgelords will be edgelords. I've said this before. Being like edge is cool, but being edgy is not cool. And that's why as a DM, like, you should give edge to your players so that they don't have to do it and be edgy. So like, what I mean by that is, as the DM, you could give them the backstory or turn their story into that sort of trauma of like, hey, you know, my parents are dead and stuff like that, and whatever else is going on. You know, give them a magic that's black and red, and forcibly say, hey, when you use this power, your voice changes to like a demonic tone. So you as the DM can do it, and what it does is it removes the player from being the one who says it. So they appreciate it because it's cool, but they don't have to feel like they're being edgy to everybody else and people are rolling their eyes because you're the DM, you're the storyteller. So you do a lot of cool stuff with that. Alright, so we've decided that the right one would be for coastals, I believe. Coastal cities. Or I think you meant the transparent one for coastals. And then this one for normal. So we're just going to drop these two over here. We're going to come into the mountain. We're going to select it. And what's nice is it'll essentially randomize the different sort of sizes. Another thing that's relatively important, it won't come into play necessarily right now, but sort of the z-axis. So I want my trees to be above my mountain in a sense. It won't matter here, but like if I ever want to depict a tree on the mountain, you have the z-axis, which is just in elevation what's higher than the other, right? If I turn it low, the mountain's over. Turn it high, this is over. So I could lower this if I wanted to, right? Copy it and then just start showing sort of, hey, there's trees further up in the mountains as well, if I wanted to do that. That's a neat little trick as well. I don't necessarily need to, so we are going to just get rid of those trees. But I do want to open up a sort of mountainside here. Sorry, an entranceway. So what I do is I grab these mountains and I can lock them. There's a way to, yep, so I can go to snow mountains. I think the music is getting a little too loud. Give me 1 second. There we go. This will be nice. There we go. Now it's cringe. This elf rogue killed me because he wanted to be a chaotic evil and then proceeds to be a murder hobo after I drew up a new character, so they changed a lot. Yeah, that does sound like it's... You hope they would change a lot. That does sound pretty bad. Not very fun. And that's kind of like the one tragic thing about D&D is a person's experience in it really decides whether they like the game or not, especially their first one. And if you've run the campaign with some people that have essentially given you a terrible time, then you're not going to think fondly of D&D. Alright. So we could easily open up this entranceway, obviously, between the two, but, oh, guys, look, it looks like a heart. The idea is you want to place something that has control of this pass, right? They would 100% do that. There's this one asset we could use, but I'm not really... Actually, no, this could work really well. So, let's change the coloration to fit the ice. Don't know if we can necessarily get... Oh, that could work. Okay, so putting in, and I saw Knight and I came and said hello. I'm glad you did. As you can guess by the name, I love Knights and I love coffee. I often have the two avatars here, depending on, so here, watch. Oh, look, there's the Knight. What I typically do is when I'm playing games, I have the Knight, and then when I'm talking about D&D, I have the Wizard. That way people can kind of know, oh, hey, if I see the Wizard, it's a D&D themed stream. And then if I see the Knight, oh, hey, he's going to be playing a game. That's why I used to kind of let people know immediately when they tune in what they can expect. But yes, I love nights and I love coffee, so hence the name Midnight Coffee. So always consider when you're making a map, if you are putting a place that you feel like could just be a very strategic standpoint for any kingdom or any organization to take control, then absolutely. So I only have one entranceway into this continent unless you go by water, or perhaps there's a quest where they can go through the caves, and that's a much more dangerous way to go, but they don't have to pay the toll. And you can decide who controls this toll or this border. Is it a Dwarven kingdom in itself? Is it some organization? Is it who controls the north or who controls the south? That's how you can add some very, very nice complexity and faction balancing into your world as well. So, I kind of like this little segment that we have right here, right now. The next thing we could do is add some villages. I believe, let me go back to my other map. What did I use for the buildings? Oh, yeah, there are some like Viking-like camps. I think if I also do town, I will get some stuff. Lore idea, love is cold and cruel at times, but never as cruel as the northern frost marches. Ooh. Keith, you are cooking, my friend. There we go. We found, oh, they're literally just called Viking buildings, and they have some snow ones as well. So, I could come here, and let's say I wanted to make a village. I could obviously... Oh, I'm not actually a fan. These are very old assets when this website first came out. What I've become a bigger fan of is... Okay, even though it might not make sense. Does it work with this? No, it doesn't. Okay, we're gonna go with these farms. So they started adding these really nice assets that you can kind of choose the sign, and then as you hold and click, it automatically places, and it almost becomes a really quick way to build out a village. Right, and so I can have this be the village that people kind of stop before they head deeper into those mines. And depending on sort of the size, sometimes you might want to make it smaller. And that's something I actually should have done right from the start. So I can make it smaller and kind of do that if I wanted. The issue is that is a little too small. Let's... Typically, for me at least, that's a little too big, but we're just gonna go with it just because for now, I'm just more demonstrating. I love making settlements in places that are definitely way too cold for humans. I suppose that humans are not the only creature that has settlements. Yes, absolutely, and that's a very important thing in, at least for fantasy worlds, is you have other races in the game. So in the context of D&D, your most notable cold race is going to be, if anyone can guess it, you get a golden star. Nope, they're already here. The Goliaths. The Goliaths are very notorious for being in the frigid cold mountains right here. And so you could definitely have it that, hey, this region is so cold that typically it is Goliaths or anyone with cold resistance can live there. For humans, you have to be able to buy clothes or maybe have like sort of a mage or someone that is able to protect you from that. So yeah, that's a very, very good thing to be thinking about. And think of what their terrain is going to be in your world, right? So for me, for example, I always have goblins have their settlements and have their villages inside of mountains. Like, that's where they live. They have dark vision. They like to hunt in packs. So mountains where everything's tight and condensed and they have the advantage, that's where they want to be. I didn't type faster than that one. Yeah, I gotta be quicker on that. Your sleight of hand check. So the reason when I was talking about ideally you want these to be smaller is because whenever you place a kingdom, you always want the kingdom to be bigger than the villages, because if they're the same size, it just kind of messes with the brain a bit. But I've also adapted to making kingdoms large on the map. So you have a couple options. Option one, when you make a city, is you could just use this as a placeholder and be done, right? Like, hey, this is here. This is the kingdom of chat right here. So you guys living your best life, and having a good time doing it. Ignore the V. And you could do that and end it right there. And this is really, really important distinction, because if you don't want to spend a lot of time on your map, keep in mind it is meant to be a placeholder. It's a tool. So if you are spending more time creating the map than you are creating your world, then I would advise for the first couple maps you make, you don't have to make it grand and drastic. You can just simply place these. Hey, this is a kingdom. And this is essentially just a place for you to stop by. This is the placeholder. Later on in sort of my experience and sort of ambitions as a DM, I have learned to sort of expand the size out by using different assets together. So if I want to make sort of a kingdom, then I will place this, right? Let's say I change the color to a nice blue over here. I'll place this. I will then go to the houses, make them smaller, and then I will place them around to kind of showcase a city that is with sort of the village. And then you would go find a wall asset. And if it's a walled off city, you would obviously find an asset that makes a nice wall. A lot of times your map is going to look a little weird and strange until you start putting things together. Then it starts to really make sense. Let me just switch this over here. See, and then you can essentially sort of have a more detailed city if you want. Commit arson against the kingdom of chat. You know what's funny is, pretty sure there's fire assets you can put. Yeah, here you go, just for you. Kingdom of chat is on fire. You guys are all burning out. So, but you can see the difference. So if you wanted to take more time, you could space it out. And the bigger you make it, obviously the better the resolution. The map, as you make the map, it's always going to look poorer than it is, because when you export the map, you're going to export it in either 4K or 8K. This is 2K right now. So it looks very blurry, but as you can see, if I go to my kingdom that I made over here, when I exported it in 8K, it is not as blurry. You can see, you can kind of see the different buildings and the houses in the main kingdom, the walls, the towers. If I go over here to this desert continent, you can see as I've built everything out here, it kind of sort of makes a little more sense and looks way cleaner on the eyes than when I was making the map itself. And that's how you could do that. Mountain regions are known for raising warriors, being hard to tax, a nightmare to govern. Being hard to tax and a nightmare to govern in place of cultural tradition. Sorry. So it makes sense that kingdoms are in low-lying open terrain. Yeah, no, absolutely. Joke's on you, I was about to foreclose on my humble little town home, and now I have an insurance claim and life policy taken out. Hey, dude, you're rich. You're the one who made it out. The Ranger subclass I've suggested last time, I never really had a really good idea of what to do for it. However, I am considering that maybe a Barbarian Archer subclass would be cool. Lanes user rage. Ooh, that could be very nice. I did put it on the agenda today to do the Barbarian Ranger subclass. I was gonna start off with it, but I was gonna wait till about an hour in to see if you and no, who is it? You and Kaiju we're going to be on, so I could make it with you guys. I didn't want to make it without you guys since you requested it. We can get into it actually pretty soon here, because I think for the map building we've reached a pretty good sort of introduction, kind of getting the terrain and the water was my main objective, and we kind of started already building a little thing here. The only thing we could probably do, we'll keep this for now and then get rid of it if we want, is to kind of establish more forest around here and then probably make a couple villages. Alright, so what we could easily do oh, look at that. We could place snow houses. We could have 2 tribes here at the very least. And you could decide if they are warring tribes or if they are friendly tribes with each other. Or perhaps one of them is sort of a more civilized tribe, while the other ones are kind of a more barbaric. So one's kind of more of a snowy village town, the other is a barbarian tribe. So we could actually kind of get rid of this and then go back to those huts. The only thing that sucks about this is having to manually place all the different assets, since for some of them it doesn't quite do sort of smart placement. I like to give it the snow look. Now what you do is you kind of copy some things around, place them in different areas, and then a little trick you can do is also grab an asset. You come over here to, where was it? The flip side. Come to the flip over here. Oh, I just realized I've had this stream cropped out, so I don't think you guys have been able to see all the editing I've been doing on it. My bad. So I thought you guys have been able to see this the whole time. That's how I was changing the colors and all that stuff. This flip mode right here, if you click it, you flip the asset, and you could use it to just make it look a little different. For this one, it doesn't really work, but if I grab this, I come over here, then I flip it, it could just give a different angle, which even placing over here can make it look a lot more different. Just like the Mongols. Yep, exactly. And so what this can be kind of cool of is the players can kind of decide what aesthetic and what vibe are they going for, right? Some characters like to go with the tribal lifestyle and tribal look way more. Others like to do the more civilized sort of villages and towns. And that's something that a player can take an opportunity to sort of roleplay their class, right? Oh, Side of Queso has accepted a quest. Congratulations. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the subscription. I appreciate it. Happy to have you. I typed in congratulations, I think, because I was thinking about that. Let's see if they have a tribal wall that we can place. Well, there's these ones, but these are 3D and they're looking at you. They're actually really cool. If you're ever running, like, you could kind of place these in the water. They would look super, super dope. But that's definitely a sort of battle mat feature. Perfect. Here we go. Wooden gates. So, immediately we can kind of place these right here. And now we're completing sort of that barbarian look. And another thing we can do is, someone brought up a good point that open-ended terrain is way easier to control. So, that is what we reflect here. You bring the trees out, draw them back in. I should be able to... Oh, no, didn't want to do that. There we go. And this can play into a huge advantage. If there is a battle happening between these two clans, these guys will not be able to use really the tree line to their advantage. Versus, if you go fight these guys, what you want to do is actually place some more forest around them. So there is some tree line and some camouflage. These ones you usually kind of want to surgically place so that you can make it look as nice as you want. I'm not going to go crazy into the detail right now, but as you can see, we've created this. Would they have separate docks or a shared one? And that's for you guys to decide. Is if you're trying to have it that these guys are against each other, then obviously they wouldn't have sort of a shared dock. Well, there's three options, right? So let's see if there's a dock asset. There kind of is. No, it doesn't really make sense to have stone. Okay, point is, let's say there is a dock. Your options is, we're going to say that this bridge represents the dock. So, option one is that if they are working together, but it's more of a difference of culture, then yeah, they could share the dock. If you want to have it that they are against each other, perhaps they are fighting for control of the dock because that is how you have trade, that's how you get a lot of commerce. But perhaps there is a third faction that controls the dock, and both sort of tribes are essentially have it as an agreed peace zone. So perhaps if the party goes to that, and you can easily set up sort of another sort of town, kind of in this area, right? I will delete these because I'm not trying to make them look pretty. Perhaps it's a neutral town and the players can start to understand that there is aggression between both sides. So that is definitely the beauty of D&D, is where you can create so many situations on why they're allies or why they're friends. Are these houses to scale with the rest of the map? That is usually, oh, nothing empty. I'm going to bed. Thank you for staying by, Nothing Empty. Have a great night. Take care, and hope to see you on the next one. So that's always the big thing, is I let people know that, hey, it's way easier to make the map if you don't think about scaling too much. Because even when I sometimes I've tried to make it right. So at times, like as you can see in this map, when I've made this Library of Khalifa, this is way up. I keep going. This is way bigger than these houses, and that's a point in my world. When they walked up, it's essentially like the Tower of Babel. It's this endless tower that is huge compared to all the buildings surrounding it. But I would go crazy having to think about the scaling of all of these assets together, because as you can see, I have Dragon Guard Fortress here, but I have Moonshine Village. They are about the same size, but in my mind and in my lore, the fortress is a lot bigger than the village right here. So not all villages are created the same too, because where I have like Heroes Rest Village, that village is way bigger than Moonshine Village. And this is what I mean by your map is a tool. Your goal is to make it look pretty and look presentable, but you shouldn't worry 100% on every little detail like that unless that is what you are okay with going for. It's going to take a lot more time, a lot more consistency. So it's really how much time do you want to spend to do it. Jerry Animations, welcome. Welcome. Hello. Nice to have you here. So yeah, I usually just tell them don't treat it to scale, especially distance. Distance is very, very hard to accurately convey in a map without you having to do a lot of work. So sometimes, to go from Dragon Keep Village here to Mountain Hold, I could say, hey, it might take you a couple hours, but to go from Mountain Hold to Torpak, I would, hey, maybe that takes you a day or two. The only thing that you want to do is you want to stay consistent with what you say. So if you tell them, hey, it took you a day to go from Mountain Hold Village to Torpak, that's now established in your world. That takes a day. So don't ever try to ignore that. Let's put it right there. Let me make, I realized. There we go. If that makes sense. Those spikes in the water do make sense. Should people have a fear of areas vulnerable to smuggling that they can't watch at all times? Trying to wonder. I think what you're trying to say is that they would put spikes in areas that they think is going to have a lot of smuggling runs. That could absolutely be a thing. Yeah, no, absolutely. I would always consider, though, the sort of almost finance situation of what the village has capabilities of. So, in a kingdom where there is a large installment on order and taxes, that's where you would have smuggling be way more rampant in, let's say, a village. And if a village can't afford to put spikes like that all around, a kingdom would be able to. I'm the original from 1889 to 1997. No, I'm the original. Oh, we have a lot of Jerrys. There's a Jerry identity crisis. I like the dynamic you guys got going on. Fraud identity is not a joke, Jim. Millions of families suffer every year. All right. But I think that concludes the map for now. We will revisit it later. Let's get rid of these. We kind of have created this northern section. Later on we can get to naming things, but we're gonna just call this chat map. We're gonna let this save, and we are going to jump into the subclasses. Nah, I was making sure it's saved. Now that it's saved, we are good. So, our first order of business is to look at the subclasses that are already there. Do you guys want to start with Barbarian or start with Ranger? Alright, Barbarian it is. Alright, so I saw that they recently came out with the Path of the Giant subclass. It's been their most recent one. It's very, very cool. What are the tropes we're trying to go for Barbarian that we feel like has not hit? So, I have thought about one. And if you guys have other ideas, I know Fern, yesterday we talked about having you have an idea. For me, my idea is a unarmed barbarian. So typically, monks are the only class that uses fists. So this barbarian would be essentially a fist user, using strength to just punch and plummet people down. I know you said sort of a ranged barbarian idea. So they would use rage to be able to do stuff to their range attacks. Which idea are we liking? Welcome back, Kaiju. We are making a barbarian subclass. So we are deciding between a fist user and a ranged barbarian. Tavern brawler with Path of the Giant. Yeah, that sounds like it could go pretty crazy. So I think I have seen unarmored way too much. That is true. Let's do the barbarian. I agree with that. And it was your idea, friend. We're gonna roll with it. So, is that potentially until we get another name going? We are going to call it the Barbarian. That's a good name. Let's increase that size. All right. So, as always, the first thing we want to do is look at what level Barbarian gets its class features. Or its spec features, subclass features. Primal path. So, 3, 6, 10, and 14. So we're going to come here. 3, 6, 10, and 14. So we're gonna have to put features for all these. It's going to be 4 features. The first thing we want to do is obviously let them start using ranged as an option. So I believe barbarians automatically get proficiency with ranged weapons, right? I can't assume they don't. Simple weapons and martial weapons, yeah. So they should be good on that department. Like a barbarian that capitalizes on conditions for someone that locks someone down. That could be really dope. Perhaps that could even be what the arrow is sort of pinning them down and causing them to be sort of unable to move. All weapons for barbarians. Yeah. Lemon fighters be at the top of the weapons. So, does range damage or rage damage specifically say that it has to be melee to get that damage buff? Let's see. Yes, so it says you have to do a melee weapon attack using strength. So that's immediately what we're going to change with this subclass. Is you can do it with ranged sort of weapon attacks. So whatever the feature name is, like a really heavy arrow that can pin them to a wall and push them back pretty far. Yeah, exactly is what I was thinking as well. Maybe they can use strength for bows. If you ever use a bow that somehow reads like, yes, it absolutely is a compound bow and you need to pull back. I actually own one. It's for the one I own, it's 70 pounds. That's how much you got to pull back. It's a lot. So Rage Ranger is the feature we're going to call it for now. So you may use strength and can add your rage damage bonus when raging. Range thrown? Yes, that is actually to the damage dice. It's already assumed you're raging during this. So that's a good point, is thrown weapons too. So like if you pick up your axe or a javelin and throw that, you could do that with strength as well. Alright, but we want to maybe give them a bit of spice, something flavor, something that is unique to them, because we don't just want to make them a normal archer. We want to capitalize on the fact that they're using strength. So someone said, so Kaiju put the idea of pinning them to a wall or pushing them back. So what we could do is, do we want to do it as many charges as your strength modifier, or would that be too much? Let me think here, 1 second. I'm thinking that essentially when they shoot someone with an arrow, they could push them back. The question is it once per long rest? Is it per their strength modifier? Prone or cripple for a turn, since there's so much power in the shot. A name of the path could be Titanic Archer. That does sound cool. Proficiency bonus for the charges. I do usually like proficiency bonus because it's always scaling up throughout your entire journey. So let's do Titanic Shot as the ability. For now, Barbarian, we will change to Path of the Titanic Archer for now. Titanic Archer is a little long, maybe. Maybe we do Path Titan. But that does kind of sound like it's melee based. Yeah, proficiency bonus. So number of times. Alright, so how about that? Number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. Pretty much when you hit someone with a ranged or a thrown weapon attack, they have to make a saving throw or they get pushed back 10 feet. Path of the Bronze Shot could be cool. We could put it for now. I think that's a good third level feature. It's allowing them to start being able to use range capabilities and allows them to start pushing people back with how strong that they're pushing it. Now we need to do level 6. So anytime we're stuck, we just go to what they get at level 6. And from there we can decide essentially an appropriate replication. So for this one, when you're raging, you can reduce some damage. Battle Rager is a very niche one. I don't like to look at that one. This is giving you, allowing your attacks to be magical, which could be a very good one to give. This one is you can't be charmed or frightened while raging. Giving yourself an elemental ability. Someone mentioned Mongols before, and I feel like that makes a great theme for a barbarian archer. I don't know what feature that would give, though. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. It's kind of like a tribal archer that is strength based is kind of a really cool theme to go off of. So the 6 levels are pretty vague. They're not following like a structure, so we could really make it anything that we want. Multi-shot, I've thought about that, like allowing them to shoot as a bonus action, or maybe while you're raging you get an additional weapon attack for range. But what if we allow them to... So the only issue is barbarians traditionally aren't magical, but I kind of like the idea with Eldritch Knight where they can call back like a weapon. But I think they technically just got that. Yeah, they just got that with Path of the Giant, where if you throw the weapon, it reappears in your hand after you hit or miss the target. So it's a little redundant with that class choice. Maybe they get advantage on intimidation checks while holding their bow, and possibly a fear ability once prolonged rest. So the only issue with that is like it's pretty powerful because like the advantage on the intimidation check is just kind of giving them a bonus to what they already are, right? Because like you have a fighter with a sword, so someone might feel like, hey, should I get one as well? I think what I might want to do is, and tell me what you guys think about this, is put some kind of bleed mechanic. Because, so, okay, so you're saying that if they get extended range for the weapons, I like the idea that Rangers, like that class, has kind of also its own unique way to play an archer. And so I kind of like it that the Barbarian isn't focused on range as much as he is focused on power. So perhaps because of how strong these arrows are hitting, it causes you to have sort of bleed stacks coming on you. To ignore the loading property or crossbows that have it. That is not bad. There is a feat that lets you take that. So, also, I just got this idea. What do you guys think about this one? What if so a number of times equal to your strength modifier per long rest when dealing damage with a ranged or thrown weapon what's the right way to say this? Double the value of your highest rolled damage dice. So this is what I'm thinking. What do you guys think about this? Pin shot I thought about for level 10. So I'm kind of keeping it for that. Level 6, I'm thinking that essentially when they shoot their bow, they can use this feature that whatever you rolled as your highest number, so like let's say you rolled 2d8 and one of them is a 7, you can use this charge to essentially double that. So it goes from 7 to 14. And it kind of plays into the idea that their arrows are strength based, so they're hitting hard. Maybe an extra chance to crit with their bow, which might make brutal critical more. That's also a good one. If you guys feel like this one is too powerful, I think we go with Fern's idea. Is they can crit on 19 to 20s. I actually really like that. Which one, Queso? This one or... Because if we go with this one, then 100% level 14 we're going to do what Fern just said, which is the extra crit chance. Do you guys feel like the double of the high value? Sounds good. So we can keep this one, and then for level 14 is where we put Fern's idea with extra crit chance. Because I believe level 9 is when you get introduced to brutal critical. So you play around with it a bit, and then 14 will feel really good when you get that extra crit chance. So in that case, Titanic might. So for level 10, we could put pinning shot. Do we want to do... I think pinning shot might be our once per long rest ability. Or short rest. Let's do short rest. May exhaust. I wrote that message before he wrote Titanic. I love lag. Yeah. It's that Australia ping. So once per short rest, you may exhaust your strength to deliver a pinning shot towards the target. Must succeed on a strength or dex. Probably a dex. No, it could be a strength. Would be restrained. Now we have to decide how long are they restrained for. So sometimes when I don't know how long I really want to make it for, I kind of make it role based. So for example, 1d4 plus 1 turn, so it's at least 2 turns. Well, I guess it's worth it if I can watch midnight at 7:30 p.m. Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you are enjoying the content. So this is what I'm thinking for pinning shot. Essentially, once per short rest, you can fire off that big pinning shot. However, I'm also down for the idea of this attack also deals an additional 1d8 piercing damage. Seems reasonable for a short, once per short rest facility. Yeah, I agree. Sin the Magician has just accepted a quest. Congratulations, and thank you for joining the tavern. Or the guild. Or the guild tavern, who knows? So I'm thinking that because it's once per short rest, it also low-key kind of pushes people into taking short rests more, which is always underutilized in D&D. And barbarians are really good on short rest because they heal a lot. So that is, I think that is an appropriate one for now. Alright, extra crit chance. I feel like extra crit chance should just be a passive. We still want to put an active as well. So Fern brought up that really good one. So you deal a critical strike on a 19 to 20 when using a ranged or thrown weapon. Level 14, the max level ability for the subclass. We could make it a very, very, very powerful shot. Our Band of Merry Adventurers is ever growing, and yep, it's awesome. I love having you guys here. So we could make it a very, very powerful shot that they do. Should we upgrade push from before as a passive too? Oh, so all of you, well, if it's all of your attacks, the only issue with that is it would just be repetitive saving throws all the time. If what you're talking about is Titanic Shot. What we could do is double the charges of it. Oh. Scale to 20 foot is actually a really nice one. So I think the best thing for level 14 is you just get benefits. So you gain the following benefits. We haven't really thought of a name just yet. So for example, one of the things is you get extra crit chance. We could say that for did I call it Titanic Shot? What did I call it? Yeah. Titanic Shot pushes the target to 20 feet instead of 10. We could say you may attempt a range attack roll as a bonus action. Any other ideas? The easy one is to say you may perform pinning shot twice per short rest. And that could just kind of be a nice set of buffs that kind of make it a little more viable. So they're critting on 19 to 20, which allows brutal critical to come into play. And that's supposed to be the main bread and butter for what makes the Barbarian Archer very unique, is that if they get that crit, that arrow is going to hurt them. Do you want to bring the bleed back? So what that could work. I think what the best thing we could do with is that upon scoring a critical strike with a ranged weapon, and this will be our last feature so we don't overdo it, is that upon scoring a critical strike with a ranged weapon, we'll say a quarter of the damage is dealt again at the start of the target's next turn. So, if they get a crit with their bow and they do all that brutal critical, once they add everything up, they divide it by 4, and the target takes that amount of damage again at the start of their next turn as they sort of start bleeding out. Should it be as a bonus action while raging to stop it being so powerful? Should what be a bonus action? Titanic Shot or... You deal 2x damage, but also to yourself. That's a masochist subclass right there. It's not a bad idea, though. It's hard to justify why you would take twice the damage. I hope you got your soup, though. I'm a big fan of chicken tortilla soup. That is my favorite soup. What's your favorite soup? Let me know. Thing is the range attack as a bonus action. You mean the pinning shot, I believe. Should we put this all? Yeah. We could, especially because at level 20 barbarians get an unlimited amount of rages, so it could be a nice little. You may attempt a ranged attack as a bonus action. Oh yeah, we put it over here. You may attempt. Oh, okay. So I get what you're saying. You're saying, should it be a bonus action while raging so they don't always get it? Yeah. No, I agree. And so now that we put the while raging, that'll balance it out. So theory crafting, brutal critical, is it extra damage dice or is it a d12? One additional weapon damage dice. Okay, so that is pretty important because for a bow, I believe it's a d8. I have an idea then. Fury bow. I do like Fury bow. The lag is doing Fern dirty. It definitely is. But it's okay. We are working together. I do like Fury bow. It can kind of give a sort of Nordic vibe. So here's what I'm thinking. We're gonna change a couple things. I don't want to take away, or I don't want to take away the crit chance. I'm going to take away the bleed. And instead, your ranged weapon attacks now deal a d12 of damage. So that for barbarians, they're going from that d8 bow attack to d12. And that plays into their brutal critical even more. So that if they do get the crit, they will on one weapon attack. Well, I guess if it's 2 d8s, you add a third d8, that's 24. If it's 2 d12s, that's 24. That wouldn't, yeah, mathematically that's the same thing. So what if I say 2 d12s then? Two d12s of damage. right? Because 2d8s is more than 1d12, so I'm actually kind of nerfing them right there on normal weapon attacks. So if it's 2d12s, then we're putting them from 24 to 36 as their maximum potential on a shot. And I think that could feel pretty good as a barbarian. The whole idea is your arrows, like your attacks, hurt more the most. Why am I getting D&D content recommended all of a sudden? I think the universe is trying to tell you something. 3d8 has a higher average, I think. It does, but I think Barbarian is always a class designed to not go for the average and go for the maximum. Because that's the whole idea of they always like to get a great axe, usually, and that's a d12 versus like a great sword, which is 2d6, which is arguably better for the average. So I know a lot of barbarians like that theme of like, hey, I like to roll the d12. And I think that's the identity we keep with barbarians, is rolling the d12. So I think this is overall nice, because even if they're not critting, they also go from 16 to 24 for their maximum potential. So the universe wants me to play D&D. You could play a medic in D&D any way you want. I used to love TF2 back in the day. It was so much fun. You might hate me. I was one of those scouts that had the, was it called the soda poppin', the shotgun that lets you jump like 10 times when you use it. That was so much fun. How does this apply to crossbows? Well, so crossbows is it also a D8, I believe? It's fine. Oh, crossbows are a D6. Crossbow heavy is a D10. Yeah, so crossbows don't get a big buff as much. Oh, whoops. So it definitely would only take it from 10 to 12, which isn't much. Does making them dual wield make them crazy? That is a good point. So your heavy your heavy range weapon attacks now deal 2d12. That's a good point, because if they were dual wielding 2 crossbows and now they're 2d12s, that would be wild. Thief medic is always a fun build. Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Yes, the soda popper. That's what it's called. The soda popper. That was so much fun. Alright, I guess I'm gonna learn some D&D rules and shit. Dude, it's a very, very fun and magical game to get into. It's a lot of fun. We're happy to have you. I also cover game stuff. So I was telling them earlier, if you ever see the wizard, I am talking about D&D. If you ever see the knight, I am talking about games and playing games. So if you ever tune into my streams, you'll be able to immediately tell what we're kind of discussing off the avatar, pretty much. Dueling house girls would have been nuts too. It would have, but I feel like it's more of a ranger or a rogue thing to do than a barbarian. So we could definitely keep it with the big hitter. So with that being said, though, I think we've done a good job off the features and making this feel really, really rewarding. So, recap. As a barbarian who wants to use... When do we get a rogue JPEG? If you meet my drawings, man, they're terrible. They are terrible. Here's a tiny little dagger right there. Oh god, that's awful. Hold up. Yeah, there you go. It's a big hilt. It used to be a sword, and it got melted, so they turned it into a dagger. And then he has his little green hood over him. There you go. Wizard equals D&D and night games. All right. Oh, wizard equals D&D and night equals games. Yeah, yeah. Most definitely. Just like the audio was messed up, so I had to delete the stream, so you can't go back and see it. But like 2 days ago, I was playing Dragon Age, and so I had the night up. And then some people were talking about a Baldur's Gate stream, which could be fun. All right, but I think we've gotten the barbarian down, so that is very, very, very good news. What we can do is we can grab it. Let's go up. Oh my god, this is so slow. You'd think there would be a quicker way. That is much quicker if I do this. Where's the... There it is. We're dragging it up, guys. We're taking it to the frost. I mean, actually, could I just create a new section here? Completed subclasses. Hello, good luck on your day. Thank you, thank you. Rob, it sounds like you're playing with dragons. That's awesome, dude. What if I copy it? Hey, we did it. Copy this. All right, we have our collection. So together, we have made Path of the Fury Bow and also the Frost Mage for sorcerers. What exactly is the average D&D explanation for someone who never really got into it? As like why you didn't get into it, or what D&D is? I'm gonna assume you're saying what D&D is. The best way I could say it is you have a table, you have a group of players around the table, and the players make characters that are in the world and in the game. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I assumed correctly then. But the issue is that if all the players were their characters, then everyone would fight over the rules. So you have one position over here that is called... They differentiate it. It's either called the Dungeon Master or the Game Master. And they are essentially the storyteller of the game. They play all the characters in the game. So if these players in the story are saying that they're going to a village, it is the responsibility of the Dungeon Master, or DM for short, to play the shop owner and the barmaids and the bandits and the animals, and they're the ones that bring the life to it. Yes, so the dice is 1 to 20. That's because if the player says, "Hey, my character wants to, you know, slap this dude in the face," right? This random NPC, then he needs to roll the dice and see if that happens. That way, D&D is not decided on one person individually. The idea is that the dice tell the story, so nothing is ever predictable. Things can go any way. And the dice tells you the result. That is how they made D&D, and it was very expertly crafted. That's how they made D&D very interesting and have unlimited possibilities when they made it in like the 70s, where we did not have as crazy technology as we did today, and we just had dice. Roll for perception check. Yeah. That's because, again, so the DM is the one who... They typically have their screen over here on the table that no one else can see. And they have all their notes. They have all their information. They know what's behind the shroud. The players don't. So roll for perception is that, hey, while the players may know that I am about to have, you know, this ambush or something, if they have an inclination or something, the characters don't exactly do, right? Because there's a separation between the characters in the world and the players in real life. So the perception check is to evaluate, does the character notice that there is this NPC trying to ambush them? And based on your class and your skills, you can get bonuses to those checks, right? So if someone's playing like an archer, typically they're more perceptive than the warrior. So the archer might notice that there's a guy lurking at the tree line, while the warrior might be too distracted looking where his feet is going and stuff like that. So that's kind of the basis of D&D. You have players that play characters in a world created by the dungeon master, where we use dice to decide what happens. Or rather, not what happens, but if our ideas work or if they don't work. And when they don't work, it's the DM's responsibility to say what is the consequence of that, right? If I try to attack someone and I miss, usually it ends there, but like let's say I try to jump off a wagon while it's moving. And on a failed check, the DM can decide, hey, with how fast the wagon's moving and the terrain, you break your leg. And that's kind of the result of your failure. Or you just simply fall and tumble and have a light sprain. So, D&D in a nutshell. Now, what everyone else will tell you, though, realistically, is it ends up with somehow the entire village burning down sometimes. So it's a very quick descent into chaos, but it's a very lovely and fun one. But yeah, there you go. So that is essentially what we're doing. So as you can see, D&D Beyond is like the official website now for D&D. You can see all the classes here. They have a lot. And when you click on a class, you're also going to select a subclass. So if you like Medic in TFT, or TF2, sorry, the ones that are best at healing from my experience is Cleric, Druid, and sometimes Bard. Cleric's a classic. Arson tends to follow my party when I DM'd a few years back. Yeah, it's it's a classic. The DM knows everything about the world and basically leads the story. Depending on the player's action, skills, class, and dice rolls, that's how I understand it. Or does it go deeper? No, that's fundamentally how it works. The DM is separate from the players because there needs to be that person who runs the game for everyone. And the players are interacting with what the DM presents in front of them. And so when you have your class, you also have subclasses. And this is a further specialization in what that character does and what they're trying to do. And this is how you can creatively make your character do all sorts of things. Because even though you're a cleric, a death cleric, and a peace cleric, and a tempest cleric are all going to have different powers that they can be able to utilize. So that's where kind of a lot of the fun comes in. So right now we're making some subclasses. We're making these very specialized ideas on what they're capable of doing. So we just made a barbarian, which it's exactly what it sounds like. Barbarian doesn't really need much explanation. It's like Khal Drogo from Game of Thrones, or just sort of a Mongolian warrior. Someone's very tough, a Viking. We made one that uses ranged weapons. So like a heavy bow, if they throw a weapon, stuff like that. And that's kind of all these abilities we just gave them. It's a lot of stuff. D&D is definitely a lot to take in when you first start. But it is ultimately my favorite hobby. Dear God, subclasses exist everywhere. There are so many of them. And there's also a lot that sort of the community have made over the 50 years that D&D has been alive now. It's very wild. Cleric by far has the most subclasses, so I kind of probably showed you a little too many. So we made a one for Sorcerer. Sorcerer does not have that many subclasses. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 choices with this one. And some of them are very simple, some of them are very intricate. And that's kind of the nice part, is when you first play the game, you can kind of play something that is very straightforward. So Fighter has a lot, but if you're a champion fighter, all it is just buffing what you already are. So you don't have to worry about utilizing new mechanics or utilizing new abilities. It's just making you stronger at what you're already doing. D&D is incredibly reading intensive. If you want to learn the game, in my experience, just playing, in my opinion, is the best way to learn. It absolutely is. I can sit here for 10 hours and explain every single mechanic on how things go. And that's because if I'm going to explain one thing, I then need to explain something else about it, which then goes into another part. And it gets overwhelming. The best way you can do it is just to play it. A lot of people also watch it before they play it. And the most popular one is Critical Role on YouTube. You can find them. They are a lot of very talented high-end voice actors that play the game. So you can see kind of, at least mechanically, how that game works. And if you like what they do, they have plenty of episodes for you to binge watch forever. But yeah, it's so overwhelming that I usually tell people, hey, you just need to know the basics of like why you need to roll dice, and then you'll pick up the game as you go along. When I was a new player, my DM just went, yeah, just get in, ask questions later, and I'll tell you what happens and why. Yeah, and that's the best way to do it. Because the DM has your back, especially as a new player. They're trying to make the game fun for you. It's their game, essentially. They're creating a game for you. So if any of you like want to know, like Baldur's Gate 3 recently came out. Everyone's, for the most part, has heard of it. Baldur's Gate 3 is set in the D&D world. The only thing about Baldur's Gate 3 is it's a game. So fundamentally, it is limited by the fact that the devs can't program so many different things. But a DM is a human mind. So they can navigate through any kind of choice that you want to make, because you're going to say, I want to do something. They're going to think about it and say, okay, this is what's going to happen. And that's why you have a range of DMs. Some are very good at it. Some need a lot of work. So it kind of is a whole process in itself. But that's the whole point of my channel here, is to also give you guys tips and tricks on how to best to be the best DM and the best player that you can be. But also we can also create some awesome stuff together and check out what you guys make. Dimension 20 is good to start watching too. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. It's Brendan Lee Mulligan, I believe, is that DM. He's a very cool guy. She's an amazing DM. I think she did a session drunk once. Yeah. Classic drunk D&Ds are always the thing. I love Baldur's Gate 3. It's a good thing. Yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 is phenomenal as a game. And it's everything you like about it is heightened in like actual D&D when you play with an experienced DM. The only thing that you can't do is like Baldur's Gate 3 has some pretty abused builds. So some people have recently gotten into D&D and thought they could do the same thing. The rules are a little differently. Larian Studios kind of took the liberty to make things more viable and fun, which they should have. That should have been the move, 100%. But everything that's awesome about Baldur's Gate 3 is directly in D&D as well, which is why it's so good. My advice is play at a table where there are other beginners and a veteran DM, so you're all in a similar mindset and position, and the DM can guide you through it. That is a very, very good way to put that out, Kaiju. There's a lot of DMs who will advertise that I'm doing a campaign for people who have never played D&D before. And typically everything will, and this is not to say it in a reductive way, but everything will be a little bit easier, will be more simplified. And that's because the objective of that game is to get people used to how D&D works, not exactly to challenge them in higher end situations that you will put experienced players through. And it's just overall so much fun to go on these quests and this adventure with your friends. Like, you're a party, you guys start to connect with each other, you're taking on all these different quests, you're building relations with NPCs, you're getting gold, you're going through dungeons. It's so much fun. D&D luckily is a system where it's incentivized to play with the GM and not versus the GM. Yeah, and that's where D&D gets to its toxic side. Its sort of very bad reputation is when it becomes a DM versus player mentality, and you see the two of them starting to fight. At that point, the level of trust is gone. And for a lot of people, unfortunately, that's their first experience in D&D, and so it strays them away from it forever, because they're like, hey, that was just awful. I don't ever want to do that again. And it sucks, because as someone who has been through those magical experiences, I want everyone to be able to have that. And I tell them, like, oh, like, trust me, you just, once you find a group that connects really well with each other, it will be your favorite hobby to do with them. Completely off topic, by the way, but your voice is very nice to listen to. I appreciate that. That's good to hear. Thank you so much. There's something I've seen a lot, though. I don't know if it's a meme. We can actually do it. Can roll for seduce. Is that an actual viable thing? So it brings up a lot of things. Is like, we can come over here and buy the stat sheet. The short answer is yes, it is a thing. So this is your character sheet, essentially. And I'm not exactly going to go over how the character sheet works in a sense. There we go. This is what you do to build your character, right? So if we were going to build this very quickly together, you guys are chat, right? You guys are, let's say, a bard and you're level 1, right? What this part is right here, this is your skills that you are proficient in. So if you're trying to scare someone as the DM, I will tell you to make an intimidation check. And if you chose to be proficient in intimidation, you are going to get a bonus to that, right? Which I'm not going to go over all these things, but just know, like, hey, if this is 5, then you roll your d20. So you grab your dice, you roll the dice, and let's say it's a 20. You then come in and add whatever modifier you have, right? So 5. So then plus 5. And then you tell me, hey, I got a 25 total. What the DM does is they decide something called a DC check, which stands for difficulty check. And what this means is, hey, you are trying to jump over a 7-foot wall. I'm going to say you need to make, right, and I go to stats right here, an acrobatics check. And for me as the DM, I decided that you need to beat a 17. So if the player rolls a 14, they do not successfully jump over that. But if they roll a 19, then they did. So when they're trying to seduce something, most often in the tale, it's a dragon, and it's the bard doing it, as the story goes. They say roll for to seduce, and what they're saying is you're trying to get the dragon to really like you. So make a roll, and the DM decided, hey, let's say you need to beat a 26 or something. And then they make the roll. If they get over 26, then they've successfully seduced whatever the target is to sort of have a night of fun with them. That being said, though, the only time you play D&D in its reductive state is if you say, I'm going to seduce, or I'm going to intimidate, or I'm going to persuade, and you don't actually say what you're going to say. So that's the only thing that, like, so for example, when someone tells me, like, hey, I'm going to roll a persuasion and convince this person to take the deal that I'm offering them, you still need to tell me what is your character saying, because you can't just say, hey, I'm rolling a dice. It's not like in the world, like in real life, if I want to convince you to subscribe to my channel, which is super quick to do, I can't just roll a dice and have you subscribe to my channel. I gotta give you some information, like the fact that we're going to be streaming pretty consistently here. We're going to be uploading a video ideally once a week, shorts coming out that are going to teach you a lot of things. That's my persuasion to get you guys to come in. And so sometimes the DM can decide, hey, that automatically works because you did such a good job. Other times it can be like, hey, that could work. I still need you to roll, but maybe this DC check is way lower now. Maybe now it's 16 because you did such a good job. So then they roll, and that's how that works. So that's the short answer of yes. You can totally... That is a tale of rolling to seduce. And the merits behind it. Very interesting, good explanation, because I could see how the dice roll system can be difficult for someone new like me. Yes, exactly. It's not as complicated, especially as a player. As a player, you just roll when you're told to roll. That's all you got to do. The DM part is where you have to think about which roll to do, when to do them, why you should do them, what should be the score they have to beat. Trust me, I've played in systems where that kind of environment is more prevalent. I've never played D&D, but I've played Pathfinder for a bit and Lancer for about a year now. I love Lancer, but the game is a lot more wargamey, where you play against the GM during combat encounters, so I'm coming in here with a little bit of different viewpoint. Yeah, I know Pathfinder and D&D are kind of those two parallel lines that can never cross, essentially. They have a lot of similarities, but if you ever try to bring either philosophy into the other, it won't work too well. Doesn't mean either one is better than the other. It's two different styles of playing the game, so it's up to you to decide which one you like. But it definitely sets for different values of what you're trying to get out of it. I've never heard of Lancer, though. That sounds interesting. When you say wargaming, it makes me think more like Warhammer. I know Warhammer is a very, very big thing. D&D is, for me, I've always realized, like, from what I know, like, with Warhammer and D&D, D&D is a very story-based, like, it is called a role-playing game, fundamentally. It's more focused on you acting out as a character in a story, conversing, making decisions, and having a fight system attached to it, while other games are tabletop games, but they're more focused on actually just doing a combat encounter, kind of like Risk. Like, Lancer is a sci-fi mecha TTRPG, by the way. Oh, published by Massive Press. If you want to look it up, yeah, we can look it up real quick. No, that's sorry to blind you guys. Let me turn back on dark mode. Oh, did it not work? There we go. Oh, I love the artwork on this. Yeah, let's check out some of the more artwork. Yeah, this looks really nice. Fifth, 15,000 years after Earth. That is crazy. Yeah, I'll definitely check this out. Well, I think I'm going to sign off for the night. It's almost 3 a.m. Once again, thank you for the fantastic stream. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I love seeing you here, Kaiju. Have a great night. Have some amazing dreams. With Ranger subclass, would a status effect based one work? Do you mean kind of like an elemental, like elemental arrows, stuff like that? I know there is... Let's check it out to see if it's redundant. There's Arcane Archer. I don't know if they put status or if they just... Yeah. Yeah, for anyone going to bed, have a great night. Take care. I'll catch you guys next time. It's like Gundam inspired. Yeah, I noticed that. It looks really good. I like RPG games, but I gotta admit that my first RPG game I ever played was Skyrim, which nowadays I cannot say is really an RPG. Skyrim has been so modded that it could be any game that you want it to be at this point. I have recently come out with a video that said my 5 favorite games of like all time. My number 1 is Dragon Age Origins, and I feel like if you're able to deal with the outdated graphics and gameplay, that game is a really, really good introduction to like what D&D could be. Because that to me is like the perfect role-playing game. 3 a.m. Well, looks like I have to get up early to see the stream. It's morning for me. Yeah, I usually stream very, very late at night. So it's the only thing that can be a little... Well, medic I think could be, especially with mods like the different starts, make it easier to have a background. Yeah. I think it means debuffs like Saboteur from Final Fantasy 13. I've not played, it's a little out of my realm, but we could definitely do... So if he means conditions, there's Arcane Archer for fighter, and they have stuff like this, like Bursting Arrow, Grasping Arrow, which can kind of like restrain you, Piercing, Seeking, which like tracks you down. Is this kind of what you're thinking of, or do you have a different idea? Alright, I'll be looking forward to the next time. Let's see if I can come in with a little bit more knowledge. No worries. No worries. I am here to teach. So you can come in here with no knowledge. I will still love to have you in the stream. But it is a fun adventure to go out there and seek. So have a lot of fun. Wonder if you can run Doom on Skyrim. You probably can. Didn't someone run Doom on a calculator? Wasn't that a thing? On a calculator. I'm pretty sure that was a thing. Right? I'm not gaslighting.
Just call me a cold calculated killer.
Yeah.
Why they provide. Let's
just skip to the...
So that's what those external... Here one, but...
So you played Mario too.
There's more in common.
There it is.
With
This guy's
3D.
playing Doom on a
I've got,
calculator.
like,
That is crazy.
the gun from Wolfenstein right there, and it's pretty fast is the thing. Like it's a more than playable thing. But whoop, Purdue, I died. Yep, that's it. It just kicked me out.
On a pregnancy test? No shot. Oh my god. The fact that it's autofilling. Dude, no way. This is a thing.
You showed me this one. Programmer somehow hardware. And so this guy said,
so crazy.
Well, the first thing he was able to show off was just video of Doom playing on a very pixelated display, as you're showcasing here. I mean, hardly play.
It's allowed to be pixelated. It's 100% allowed to be pixelated.
Of a pregnancy test, but then you said to me, "Well, wait a sec. Do those screens have that many pixels?" To which I said, "I'm surprised by that too." So then I look a little deeper into the article, and it says it's important to note that Foon did replace the display and microcontroller, so the only part of the original tester is the shell. However, getting Doom running and playable on a 128 by 32 pixel monochrome display, no transparency on it.
People make some wild
I think
things.
it's a feat nonetheless.
That is so impressive. Doom can be played on... Yeah, I'm willing to bet it can be played on Skyrim. You probably jump it in an arcade machine mod and just play it on there. That is so wild to me. Yeah, Doom on a pregnancy test was hilarious. It's wild. It is. Yeah, I would not be shocked on how many things you can run it then if a pregnancy test works. That is blowing my mind. All right. I think the last thing on the night's agenda is villains. Doom in Minecraft. That could be kind of cool. I am a huge fan of Doom, especially Doom Eternal. It is, again, going back to what I said about 5 favorite games of all time, Doom is like my third. I think I ranked it number 3. I love that game. It's so much fun. So much fun. Call of Duty multiplayer. Oh wait, TF2 controlled with a steering wheel. Call of Duty multiplayer controlled with a flute. Yeah, I saw that guy who got the the snipe shot with the flute. That was funny. Everyone's like, imagine getting clapped by a guy playing on a flute. Like, that's crazy. That is so wild. What world are you building here? So we just closed the world. I can open it up real quick. We are essentially making a world with you guys. Combination of me and you together. So chat map is what I call that. I can just open it up real quick. We've built the first part of it because it's not obviously going to be done in one night. But essentially we are going to build a fantasy world together, making the map and then making the lore for it as well. That way we can have a lot of fun. That girl played Elden Ring on a harp. Yeah, imagine like playing Elden Ring and you're having difficulty on a controller and then you see some girl playing it on a harp and I have no idea what the instrument is called in English. Harp is an instrument. I'm going to take your word for it. So, as you can see, Zamos, I'm going to assume the X is silent. We've just built this northern section, so we just decided to make the terrain, the water. Later on, after we build the entire world, pretty much, we're going to go in this little note tool here. We can drop a note, and it allows us to put some notes, so that way we can write out the lore of the world together as well. And this is stuff that, for the first time, I'm doing with you guys, because I have made my own worlds. So this is like the first world that I have made for myself for my first campaign. And then I made another one, which is kind of like a pirate campaign. And then I finally probably did my biggest project out of all the maps, which is this very, very, very large one. This is when they brought 8K resolution, so I was able to make maps with nice detail when you zoom in as well. Before it didn't used to be like that. It used to be super blurry. So like when I made this map, I made it one continent because if I wanted to focus on the detail, it would just be super blurry. You wouldn't be able to see anything. But once they added this, it just became really, really nice and fun. And so I have a lot of fun making maps. I've learned a lot of things as I was making them. And so making it together with you guys sounds like it could be a very fun adventure. However, you can also see when I was building maps super late at night because I started misspelling stuff, right? So like the village, and I had to make that canon in my world that now there's a village out there. How long does it take to make a map like that? So significantly shorter when you have more experience, because when I made this first map, this probably took me like 2 to 3 months of not straight. It's not like I dedicated everything to doing this. My advice is if you're gonna make a map, do it in the course of a couple months, but also only a couple hours per night, because you're gonna get inspiration. You don't want to try to like essentially make it a sprint. It's a marathon. So a couple hours a night, you get in, build out areas, build out zones, name them, have fun with it, take your time. And then as you get more experience, you realize what you liked, what worked, and then when you go to your worlds, you're able to replicate that very, very quickly. And it makes it a lot of fun. And that's where really the game shines a lot. There's something nice about homebrewing D&D content with another's presence. Yes, because it's always great to get other people's opinions on it. Don't go for your players' opinions if you're a DM, because you don't want to break that sort of shroud of mystery and stuff. Go talk to other DMs. And if you don't know any other DMs, then come to these streams and ask me questions. I'm always happy to answer. But collaborating with someone is how you always forge the best ideas. It solidifies that, yeah, this is a good idea, or hey, maybe you should do this instead. God, I love world building, but I only make very fine details, not the main pillars that actually make the world function. And that's the thing. Everyone has their... everyone has what they're really good at, and what they just kind of need to improve on over time. So for some people, they can make really good maps, but they struggle with the world building. Other people can make really good world building, but they struggle with making a map. It's about not like that you have to give up on one, but whatever you're strong in, spend more time working on the other, because you're obviously strong in that regard, so you don't need to focus on that one as much. You'll still build it up, but build the other one up, and then you'll have the best of both. D&D allows me to be a knight slowly realizing he's gay, which is why I love it so much. The journeys are what matter. It's never about the destination. It's always about the journey. Very interesting. Yeah. It's, for me, world building is a very, very fun hobby. Did I say world building? I don't know. But another important thing that people also sort of don't realize is finding a comfortable place for you to do your writing that kind of activates that part of your brain. So for me, at least, I would build my maps out, and then I would go to like a coffee shop, and that's where I would write out my lore and stuff. And sometimes in your map, you could do some funny stuff like hey, come here, it's totally safe, and we have lots of treasure pyramid. My players were very excited to go to that one. Here's an important question I really have to ask about the world building. Will there or can there be JoJo references? There can be anything we want, guys. It's accumulation of both of us together. We can put as many references or as little references as you guys want. So yeah, we could definitely put we just gotta put Speedwagon somewhere in there. I suffer from hubris. The first campaign I've ever run, which I'm running currently, is entirely self-running. God help me, why did I do this? My first campaign was awful. It was terrible. I'm not saying that you should expect your first campaign, like you should root for your first campaign to be bad, or but be content with if it is, because it's the first time you're trying something that is incredibly not taxing, but incredibly difficult to do it at its highest level. Because no matter how many years of experience you have, even decades, you will still make mistakes, and you'll still make decisions that not everyone agrees with. But that's fine, because either A, you're learning from whatever mistake you did so you can do it better next time, which is the very classic lesson to learn from mistakes, or B, you have forged an identity of what you like as a DM, and you stand by it. Hey, I know other people may not agree with this, but I personally, that's how I DM. That's what makes me unique over everyone else. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing when you disagree with other DMs, even as great as they are. Like, for Critical Role, Matt Mercer is like he's regarded as the greatest DM in our time right now. Does not mean that I or everyone agrees with everything Matt Mercer does, but it does not mean we discredit how amazing he is at what he does. So having that approach for other DMs too, to be able to say, hey, even though you're not running the game how I would run it, I absolutely love the way you run your game, and I love your ability as a DM. That's important, because that allows you to be able to be in other campaigns as a DM and as a player, and not put this unfair sort of stipulation on them. Currently, it's going really well, and we're 4 sessions in. My players are very kind and patient, and they help me in a constructive way. And that's super good. That is super good, because the first time you play D&D, where everyone's trying to figure out what's going on, is the most fun, but the most chaotic. For us, we did so many things wrong, and we looked back and realize what we did wrong, but it was so funny to see it happen and be like, yeah, that was a crazy way to run the game. Respect is very important in D&D. It is the single trait that keeps the entire game running and alive, because if respect kind of gets broken, then that's when the campaign falls apart. So here's the players. in a party. Again, ignore my my drawings. They're terrible, I know. But you have your party and you have your DM, right? The DM is always going to be different in the dynamic of the group. They always will be. Dead by Daylight. That is true. Respect is probably also important in Dead by Daylight. I think it was a mistypo there. I think he meant to put D&D. B is right next to N, so it would make sense. So as a DM, right, you are seen as the de facto leader of your group because you are the storyteller. You're the one who presents the game. It's your game. It's your world. Your NPCs. You are the person bringing them along for the ride, pretty much, to show them what you got going on. It's for that reason that it's important that when it's another campaign or another sort of group, when you become a player now, right, you need to think of yourself as blue and not white. You are one of the players. It is now a different person who is the DM. Because if we have two of these, it's going to create a problem. You guys are you are coming into this game as a player with this approach. And that is where it is going to get toxic, because you are going to start thinking, I would have done this, I would have done that. As a DM, I would have done this thing. And that is very unfair to this DM. And it's also unfair to yourself to not give yourself a good experience as a player. That being said, it is completely fair to try DMing and decide that you absolutely hate it. And hey, I love D&D, but I love D&D as a player, and I'm going to stay as a player. That is perfectly fine. In fact, that's what most people do, because DMing is a lot of work, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of nerves and all this stuff. But if you get through all of that and you master it, it is a very unique and amazing experience. But don't go into other campaigns with the mentality of a DM. Go into it with the mentality of a player. That is the overall message of that. I cannot type on my phone. Leave me alone. Typing on the phone is difficult. It could be very difficult at times. I'm very used to typing on a keyboard, so I can put a phone in my hands. I will not do well. DMing is a lot of fun. It is. It's so much fun. But it's also not for everyone. Not everybody ends up liking it. And it's definitely more respectable to try it and realize you don't like it than to never try it at all. Because at least you tried something, you realized it's not for you, but you've learned more about yourself. You absolutely did. And that's what makes you an improving person through your life. Don't eat the cake as a baker, eat the cake as a hungry person. That's a good analogy. Exactly. Exactly. When you're hungry, everything tastes better. When I'm starving, that's the only time kale sounds like a very delicious ingredient. Other than that, don't even put it in my face. Alright. It's nearly 2 a.m. We have been streaming for about 3 hours. Yeah, I'm kind of there as well for the Forever GM. I'm hoping very soon that my campaign will end and one of my players will take over and I can finally be a player for the first time in like 2 or 3 years, which will be very exciting. All right, we are going to end the stream soon, but before we do, 2 things I can actually talk about. One is going to be the villains to close it off for the night. The second thing is, this gave me an idea of very recently what I did is, if you guys are in a D&D campaign, did I erase the players in the game? Okay, whatever. Okay. We're going to redraw, but I'm going to explain as I draw. If you're in a D&D campaign, and let's say this has gone on for, about a year. 6 months to a year is the average D&D story time. Telling stories is a beautiful thing. Not everyone can do it, but they can learn. Yes. And that's an important reminder for yourself. When I first started as a DM, I was nowhere near what I am today. And that only is because I didn't give up on it and I chose to keep improving, even when I did a complete shit show at the start. I'm mostly joking. I complain forever about only GMing, but I also play a decent amount. Also, anyways, yes, villains. Yeah. It is a term, for those of you that don't know, forever GM or forever DM is the sort of term given when you're in a group dynamic where no one else is interested in DMing but you. So you're kind of DMing out of necessity. And you want to be a player, but no one's quite ready or wants to DM yet. So hence the term that you're forever the DM. All right. Speaking of different DMs, though, in campaigns. Never back down, never what? So, when you guys are in your first campaign, second campaign, third campaign, I did this very recently. It worked really well. When the campaign is going to kind of end at around its 3/4 mark, what I did was I had, at the end of the session, I messaged my players a week prior. My bad. Let me do it in chronological order. When I realized the campaign was 3/4 of the way there, I messaged all my players and I said, hey, I want to know who's interested in DMing next. And if so, I want you to get a sort of pitch ready for your campaign idea. Like a 2 to 5 minute presentation, not actual slideshows, but just like a speech ready. Let's mute because the ad's playing. Get a sort of 2 to 5 minute speech ready describing what the dynamic of your campaign is, its theme, what it's about, all those stuff around. And then when it comes to your next campaign, your next session, at the end of it, you have everyone sit down and you have each person who's interested in DMing, so let's say it was these two that said it, give their 5-minute speech. And they would say, hey guys, my campaign is that we are going to be in a magic school, a magic academy. It does not mean you have to be a wizard, but you know, you could be a fighter, you could be a mage. Regardless, it's structured kind of like Hogwarts, where we're going to be in a magic school. That's my idea for a campaign. Someone else can be like, hey guys, my campaign is going to be very dark and gruesome with rituals and sort of, sorry, that's a burp, evil gods, stuff like that. And then as a party, as a group, you guys vote on which campaign you guys want to do next. And then that way, let's say this person gets chosen, they have still some time to make the world because you're only 3/4 of the way there. So until you finish the world, it gives them time to create their world rather than if your campaign ended and then you tell them and it's like, all right, now we have this awkward time where we're waiting for our next D&D session, which is kind of how groups can fall apart. It's like, hey, you know, we haven't met in 3 months. I'm good. I'm done. But it also gives this DM comfortable time to build it. You're explaining the average plot of an anime that releases nowadays. Most definitely. Most definitely. And in case you guys want to know the voting criteria, because this is also very important. Anytime you have this situation, here's also a little trick. First vote, second, third, fourth, whatever it is. The value of your top pick and your last pick should not be the same. So if someone said, hey, my first pick is DM number 1, right? DM number 1 should receive a value higher than if number 4 got their pick. And you could just simply make that by the opposite values. Okay, let me explain this in a better way. Let's say you have DM1, DM2, and DM3. I'm going to explain this because I told my friend about this and he asked me like, well, how do I calculate the votes? Okay, so let's say DM1 got 5 picks at number 1 spot, right? 5 people said DM1's my number 1 person. What you do is you equate 4 points to that. Okay. So number 1 is 4 points, 2 would be 3, 2 and 1. That way, if the 6th person said, oh, number 1's my spot, but I put him at the end, he gets 1 point for that. Okay, so that's 5 points total. This is a little bit of math. I'm not gonna bore you guys with this, but this is the concept of how you can utilize this method and just do the result, and it makes sense. Because the idea is someone's first pick should have higher weight than their fourth pick. So it's not a numbers of who just got the most amount of votes. It's a numbers of who got the highest priority votes. But yeah, that is one of the things to talk about. Is a nice way to also get people to become DMs is open that path to them. Let them know, hey, I'm opening this up for everyone. Anyone interested in DMing, now's the time for you to talk. Because some people feel like they want to DM. I'm trying to grab the eraser. Oh my god. Some people want to DM, but they feel like other people want to do it. And so they're nervous. They're like, oh, well, let them go first, and then I'll do mine when the chance comes. But nobody knows that they want to DM because they're keeping it hidden to themselves. But all right, let's move to the final point of the night. Villains. All right. We have seen a lot of villains. Every story needs one, obviously. I'm going to make a video, a little sneak peek very soon here. That's going to be like my opinion, the 5 best villains in gaming. I'm not going to say the list, so the video stays interesting. But what I am going to talk about is if you are a DM or a player. Wow, I cannot. There we go. What? That's where I messed up, guys. That's embarrassing. That's how you know it's getting really late at night. I'm just making these mistakes. Give me 1 second. We're in a magic school from an anime. Any idea how much that narrows it down? That's true. It's kind of how much my Pathfinder campaigns are. My GM just gave us a list of books he had, and we voted on which story we wanted to play. Yeah, and that's fun because it grabs the interest of the players themselves. Okay. So, you have 3 main types of villains that you are going to create. Okay. There's going to be the villains. I don't want to say it. There we go. I got it. There's going to be the villains that make them feel. These are your sympathetic villains. Sympathetic. I'm saying the word wrong. These are the villains intended for the party to sympathize with them. They have a very... so you're making a villain now. We maybe could. I'm more talking about if you guys are going to make a villain, keep these in mind. Talking about villains like in general. Because I've seen a lot of DMs make their villain, their BBG, and they face a lot of problems because they have not chosen an identity for that villain. So it's kind of more villain identity. The Evil King version 2586. Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. You have villains that can make them feel, right? And these are tragic villains that are more a victim of circumstance, right? It's... The idea is, hey, they were not born evil, their mentality was not evil, but something happened to them that turned them evil. And that could be something that's like, hey, their family were killed, they were enslaved, they had all these things done to them. And that's something where you can expect these things from your players if done correctly. The idea is that it's meant to be a heartbreaking fight. It is more of we are killing you out of necessity or defeating you out of necessity, not out of hate or malice. We need to... they might try to convince them, right? And so because of that, it's going to be a speech-heavy sort of interaction. This is the most story-driven type of villain you will get. Because as an audience, as players, we are going to connect to their motivations. We're going to relate to what happened to them. And that is going to ultimately cause us to care about them. Villain number 2. You make them hate. These are the villains that are evil for the sake of being evil. And that's not a bad thing. Sometimes you need that. In fact, if you are going to make a story-driven villain, oh, autoplay. Was playing some random thing on YouTube. If you are going to make them go against a story-driven villain, then you don't want every single person to also be a story-driven villain that is sad and has a tragic story, because then the players are just going to get mentally exhausted of having to listen to every single person's story. Make sure you filter your villains out and make different ones. So, the ones you want them to hate, they are evil for the sake of being evil. There is no hidden agenda or reason why they're doing it. They just have a twisted, unhinged mentality, and they just want to... They either want power, they either want to kill them, they just hate them, they're just angry. They may be just a straight-up demon or a manifestation of evil. Regardless, they're here to just kill them. What can you expect with this? One is you can really piss off the players, and you can do this through different ways, and that's... I'm already struggling to come up with a way to translate this into a system with faceless mech combat. Maybe narrative fight to Spanish, though. I'll come up with one eventually. Mech fights are kind of hard in D. I've never done a mech fight in D&D. I know were you the one who was talking about Lancer? It might be different, but yeah, that one does sound tough. Not gonna lie, writing a villain is very difficult. You see it in a video game nowadays. Yeah, a lot of villains you see in games are just very generic and don't hit the mark, and it's because they try to make these villains all of these things, and it's just does not work. You can't have a villain that is going to do some things that will piss off the players, things that are objectively, morally incorrect, where most people can agree, hey, they've crossed the line here, right? Their verdict is the justice is to kill them, pretty much. You can't have them do these things and then be like, well, you just don't understand their motivations, or you just don't understand, like, they were the hero all along. They were trying to do something, or maybe that's just... At some point, if a villain crosses this red line, then that is when they become unredeemable. And if they are unredeemable, I spelled it wrong, but forgive me. If they are unredeemable, then your players no longer care about them. They just want to kill them. And that is what you can expect with making them hate them. Is that they will be... I guess, aim to kill is the best way I can say it. So, if you're going to put a completely evil villain, don't expect your players to have a sort of attachment to the villain. They just want to kill them because they hate them. However, hate is one of the strongest emotions. Because there's nothing that is going to motivate them more than really wanting to stick it to the person they hate, just out of spite. They hate their guts. They mess with their shit too much. They've maybe killed a couple of their favorite NPCs. They burned down their house, whatever it is. They've killed their dog, and now it's John Wick after them. They just want to see them go down. That is a big benefit you can have there. The third type of villain you can have is the one that makes them laugh. I guess make them laugh. So, comical villains, funny villains, ones that just kind of enter a shit-talking contest. These are villains for fun campaigns. They are not for serious writing. They are not for serious role-playing. They're just there to be more of a antagonist than a villain. You can expect like a rivalry, pretty much. I'm spelling so many things wrong. Forgive me, guys. But also, it's 2 in the morning, so you can expect a rivalry, more of a lighthearted journey. You're the Lancer guy? Yeah, so I don't know if they've maybe talked about how to translate that. That's the thing I mean. Introducing a tragic villain in a mech-based system has to be done outside of combat, so I have to play more around lore exposition or more meta arcs like patrol from NPCs. Yes. So like, yeah, in D&D, like when you're fighting sword to sword or sword to magic or whatever it is, magic, you can talk because the idea is you're close enough to do that. In a mech, maybe they use a radio system, but even then, it's not exactly perfect. I will very soon talk about ways that you can make them feel. There are some rules to that as well. But this is definitely a bantering fight, right? This is for making them laugh, the lightheartedness. Think of like Moon Knight half the time. Like you're there to just kind of laugh for most of the time. You're there to shit talk each other. You're there to just like, hey dude, where's my money? Give me back the gold you stole. These are not the only types of stereotypes or tropes or categorizations. These are just kind of the main three. You either have villains that make them feel, right, sad and sympathetic, villains that piss them off and make them want to kill them, or villains that make them laugh and, you know, they're just kind of funny. That being said, though, before we head out, I want to talk about story-driven, because odds are this is what most people want to go for, because it creates the most, not the greatest villains, but the villains that will stick with you permanently through your life. They will create the biggest impact on you. The way you want to do this is, I'm going to draw in red. This is my villain, right? And I've decided he's going to have a sad, tragic story. In my opinion, the best villains are the ones that do what they do for another person. A very good example is Mr. Freeze. Yes, that is a very, very good motivation. So the best villain that like I've written and I've had experience in with my players that they've absolutely loved was in a world where essentially, I don't want to go over the lore so much. I'll do it very quickly. Bear with me. So, in this world, there was a time where magic ruled over people. So magic ruled over man. And what this meant was that mages would use magic to enslave the population under them. So, what ended up happening was the uprising of people that ended up breaking magic's rule over man were the people that became paladins and clerics. And they did this through a special material that was found in the world that allowed them to essentially absorb magic in there. It allowed their weapons, their armor, to have resistance to magic, which allowed them to start fighting them. So, my main villain was the first person to weaponize that element and use it to kill the first warlock that was essentially having this slavery dominion and empire over people. As time came along and he freed more and more people in the world from the cruelty of magic, they ended up discovering that there's a difference between wizards and there's a difference between warlocks. And while all of them were labeled warlocks for being evil, pact magic and arcane magic were fundamentally different. But for paladins and clerics, they do not see it that way, because for them, they've lived in a world where regardless of who had the magic and what the magic type was, it completely took away their free will. Eventually, there's a tragic event where the person who is the paladin has his family killed by a sect of warlocks. But for him, again, he doesn't see a difference between pact and arcane. He just sees that magic is magic. The only thing that makes paladins and clerics different with their magic is that it's divine magic, and it's given to them from some deity they worship that they have to adhere to its rules, but you don't have to do that with arcane magic. So, this villain's goal is to completely wipe out magic from the entire world. That results, he is still a villain, so that results in the hunting down and persecution of mages in that world. So I had a player who was playing a wizard, and he had to hide the fact that he was a wizard in that world, because if they found out, those Templar guards would eventually go after them. Yes. You could see my inspiration. Dragon Age was a huge part of my life. It's very much like how the Templars, and that's why I use the word Templars, how the Templars were built to contain the mages and make sure that they do not go crazy. So, that being said, he had a motivation to wipe out magic from the world. The reason he wanted to do that was because he believed that if magic was gone, then the ability to enslave and kill people to that degree would never happen again. So for him, he believed he was doing what was necessary for the world. If he had to kill the mages that were stopping him from doing that, then so be it. He is doing it for the rest of the people. And that's what the players had to tackle with, was the morality of, hey, it kind of, most things kind of relate to real life in a sense, right? That's how you make it relatable. And so it's kind of just a classic issue you bring up of, are you going to blame the fact that the population is armed with the ability to harm another, or are you going to take away the ability to ever be armed in the first place? Yeah. Yeah, so you could definitely see some Dragon Age Templar inspiration right there. And that's perfectly a good thing to do. Take the things that you really like, be inspired by it, because when you describe it and when you have it in your game, you're going to be very passionate about it. I already have an accidental comical villain in the very first encounter. I had a grunt that was just deployed as a cannon fodder. Through some miracle, the players could not hit it at all. There you go, dude. I've had that. I've had a goblin who has rolled in, not in a row, but in one encounter with all the saving throws. He's rolled 3 natural 20s, and that guy was just forever established in the lore as a goblin that was completely resistant to magic. That sounds very interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to give you the cliff notes. Like, over the course of a campaign where you spend months slowly uncovering the story, it's definitely way more explained better and drawn out. I'm just giving you the cliff notes. So now they are a reoccurring enemy that gets stronger each time they face them. Plans to have their story end in a redemption arc where the grunt realizes that fighting for the... I assume there's going to be another message. Alright. Point is, when I did my tragic villain, right, who had something that I wanted them to connect with and sympathize with, which was them learning that his family was captured, tortured, and had all these things done to his family. You don't want the person themselves to tell you the trauma, because if they do, then the players are just gonna say that they're edgy. That's just how they're gonna kind of take it. Like, oh, you're just trying to get my sympathy points, blah, blah, blah. You're trying to get me to join you because, oh, you have a sad story, boo-hoo. And a lot of times, it's very poor roleplay from the players, absolutely, to kind of delve down into that level, like stoop down there where you're kind of like, oh, you're being edgy, screw you, blah, 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 and not play it out in character. But one thing that you can do that works really well is have the people around the villain, right, his underlings, or even heroes who know his story and may have known his or her past or something, they are the ones who end up creating the story that the players learn about the villain. They bring the backstory. Because a tragic villain is also so... Like, these villains should be so hell-bent in their ways. They don't care to convince other people to join them. They know they're right. They're just setting out to do what they want to do. And that's what makes it much more impactful when the players finally get to meet the villain or get to encounter them again. Is that They are essentially, they have all this knowledge that they figured out, and they're trying to convince them to do something else, or they're going to put them down, but they have a heavy heart doing it. I'm 100% sure that most manga ideas were crafted in a D&D session now. Yeah, there's a lot of, like, the isekai genre in general is very rooted in, like, D&D. Like, oh, you know, we're normal people that are jumping into a fantasy world. And you can tell a lot of them have, like, game mechanics for that reason. I know there's a lot of people, like, a lot of fantasy writers will say that their stories that they've made are actually, like, a D&D game that they've played. Like, they've gone through a D&D campaign, and they're essentially writing a story about their character, like, what they went through. 99% of isekais. Yeah, absolutely. Changed my mind. Well, that's the funny thing is there's the show Goblin Slayer, and it's actually like in the D&D world itself, because there's scenes where they're like rolling dice and they're talking about it, and without saying explicitly it's D&D, it's pretty much D&D. But that's the thing about villains is if you're making a tragic villain, do this trick. Have other NPCs other than the villain themselves be the ones who tell them the backstory. Then when the player confronts the villain, they're going to question them, and then that's when they are going to be able to get their take, like the villain's take on it. So, with that, it is perfectly 2:30, everybody. That is a very wonderful stream. Yes, the Goblin Slayer is the best example. Don't look it up if you have a weak stomach, though. Yeah, I love Goblin Slayer. There's a lot of controversy on it. I usually tell people skip the first episode, but yes, it, like, if you feel like the show is too hard to watch, then yeah, it's perfectly fine to just say, hey, I'm not going to watch it because it's very brutal. But it is a very dark world in a sense. There's a lot of comedy obviously in it. There's a lot of lighthearted moments, but yeah, the story itself does not shy away from sort of brutal circumstances that can reach people. And for some people, that's a style of genre that they like. Like, that's the big thing about Berserk. Berserk is very brutal. Berserk is just as brutal as Goblin Slayer. If not, honestly, it's pretty worse. But Berserk is widely loved as a manga. The first episode with the, yeah, we don't need to say it. I usually, anytime I recommend the show to people, I tell them that, hey, the first episode does have a pretty hard scene to get over, especially with especially when it's animated. Like, it's one thing if you read it, it's another thing if you watch it kind of like animated in a show. That being said, though, I understand that the author wanted to establish that, like, goblins were super evil and they deserve to be killed, because you want to essentially remove any, like, you want to, like, dehumanize the enemy so they're easier to kill. But yeah, personally, I wouldn't have showcased the scene to that degree. Like, well, we'll make that a very quick topic. There are some trauma that players don't want roleplayed, and it's important to ask your players, or as a player to tell your DM, what's in your red box of things you just, like, personally don't want to see. And for me, that situation, right, the R word, is something that I will never ever describe as a DM. The most that I will do is I will tell you that someone is victim to it, right? Or, like, the threat of it. But yes, I am not going to roleplay or describe the scene as it happens. If for some reason it's happening, I say, hey, this is happening, but that's that's it. Like, we're not going to describe anything further than that. So that being said, it's important to, if you feel like there's any players that are, like, if you're going to make a dark fantasy campaign, make sure you let your players know so they are prepared ahead of time. So you don't just catch them blindsided and then they end up hating you for it. Yes, thank you for mentioning this. Always ask beforehand what your players and you as the GM are uncomfortable with. Yes, and that it's very important because sometimes a player could just not fit the campaign either, right? There are some things that are understandable, but like if there's a player who says like, hey, I'm just not cool with like any killing at all, then it's also fair for you to say as a DM like, hey, my campaign is going to have killing in it. Like there will be people that kill each other. So at that point, I'm just going to have to ask that like, hey, you know, unfortunately, you know, step away from the campaign, but we're still going to be friends and everything. DMs also have the responsibility to make sure their players are comfortable. Yes. Well, like, so there are things that are meant, like, obviously anything tense is supposed to be designed to make them uncomfortable in the situation of, you want to make the character uncomfortable. That's the best way I could say it. There's a difference between making the character uncomfortable and making the player uncomfortable. Because if the player is uncomfortable, you're very possibly crossing that red line. But if you're putting situations where the character is uncomfortable, that's good narrative telling, right? If there's a tense situation where it's kind of like a Wild West, gunslingers are everywhere, or guns are pointed everywhere, right? That's tense, that's uncomfortable for the player. That could work really well. But yes, always communicate what can be big problems, what can be sort of red lines for you to cross. Another thing is religion. Like D&D has the Forgotten Realms. They have their deities. I think it's a sort of universal red line to not bring in real life religion into your D&D game because you're inevitably going to step on some toes. 100%. And it's understandable why you do. So I've had a case where someone has told me that a DM tried to put actual sort of Abrahamic religions and real life religions in the game, and it did not go well at all because there are players who will take that very seriously. And again, it's understandable why they do. If you make the character uncomfortable while the player has the time of their lives, it's personally a sign that you're a good DM. Yes, it's great immersion. There's a fine line to tread where you can discuss uncomfortable topics, but you have to make sure that it doesn't enroach people's real life fears and disgust. Yes, very well said as well. And that's what you do when you start your campaign. Just let them know, hey, if there's any red lines or any things you guys don't ever want to see or even hear about, message me privately and let me know what they are, and I can make sure that they're not in the game. And there's things even for you as a DM to tell players, like, hey, again, with the R word, I tell my players if that is something I will never allow players to even do. For me, that's just a big red line. I never want to ever have that situation be role played. So yeah, it's fair to have your red lines as a DM as well. I mean, having being similar to the Greek Italian gods seem cool in my eyes. Yeah, so you can have it, you can always have it narratively be there, right? Like, narratively, this person was abused. Narratively, this person was murdered. This person was kidnapped. Most red lines are not the fact that they exist. It's when they're explicitly shown to the people. And that's the thing about Goblin Slayer. It's not the fact that what that goblin did. It's the fact of, like, for a lot of people, what their problem was is that they showed it essentially being depicted in real time. Always remember that D&D is a game about communication. If anything's going wrong, if you have any ideas or insecurities, talk. It's very important too. Very, very important too. We're all human beings after all. So communication is what connects us. And yeah, exactly said. And don't feel embarrassed to share any red lines you have. It's completely fine. Most people are pretty universal about their red lines. Everyone can mostly agree that, hey, even in a fantasy game, we just don't want to see these things. And the best way I could say it, if you're ever unclear about what should you do, just follow what games do. Like, look at what games do, right? If you play Skyrim, or you play Call of Duty, or you play World of Warcraft, or you play League of Legends, what are things that games do? Those tend to be the legal and social acceptable things to depict, right? In games, you're able to kill people, you're able to steal, you're able to set things on fire. So stuff like that. But on that note, to not end the stream in a more grim topic, we will continue on possibly tomorrow. I'm like 70% sure there will be a stream tomorrow around the same time, so I hope to see you guys there. If not, then everybody have a great rest of your weekend. Take care. Love each other. Zeus. Yeah. Yeah. No, most definitely. But take care. Thank you guys for catching along or staying along, communicating with me, interacting with me. I love this community that we're building. Gonna go ahead and end the stream tonight. There's some videos on my channel that if you have not watched can keep you company. Other than that, everybody have a great, wonderful night. Grab your cup of coffee and enjoy the rest of it. Take care. Peace.